Hey everybody, Royal Lines UK, Matt and Ant here with some special guests, Craig, Simon and Neil from the Giants, Steelers and Chiefs respectively. We're going to go live pretty much straight away because we don't want to waste any time. If you guys have some questions for the guys while they're here, because they will only be here briefly and then we're going to go into training camp, myself and Ant afterwards, get the questions in and you'll need to do it quick because otherwise there won't be any time. And without further ado, we are going to get on with this. So we're going to do Giants first, because of course the game for that is on Thursday. Then the Chiefs, which is the following Saturday. And then the Steelers, which is the following Saturday after that. Right, guys, questions in the chat, please, please, please. And we are going to go for this. I really hate I don't have a better title for the show, but it's an ongoing battle. Anyway, all right. Ant, you good? Or is there anything?
No, you do this sort of stuff. I'll just sort of sit here in the back. So as to minimize time usage.
Chime in with some good questions. You know I'm thick as pig shit.
No, I never tell you that though.
All right, here we go.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Royal Lines UK podcast. God, I can't speak. Guys, so bad. 281. Which is better, a giant or a lion? There's only one way to find out. Fight! My name's Matthew Turner alongside Anthony Fitzpatrick, and we are joined by some special guests. Craig from Big Blue UK and Ireland, Simon from the UK Steelers podcast, and Neil from Arrowheads Abroad to check out all of our preseason games coming up in the next few weeks. Guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to be back.
Great to have you guys back. Right, we're going to crack on with this without further ado, and then we're going to get into our training camp stuff and news, and there's quite a bit of it later. So, Giants is coming up this coming Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, midnight in the UK, and the Giants have been extremely active in this off-season in a bid to boost their expectations. Daboll, I think maybe it's fair to say, Craig, is a little bit on a hot seat, but you guys have gone all out drafting Malik Neighbors and Tyler Nubin, Andrew Phillips. You've traded for some depth as well traded for some big-time players in Brian Burns, practically stealing him at that price. And then, of course, you've invested in your off-season as well. You've brought in maybe a high-end backup in Drew Lock. Maybe he could start. Who knows? Illuminor, Singletary is a fantastic running back and has been for a long time. How's the off-season been, man?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Let's put it that way. We've had expectation roller coaster, I think is probably the easiest way to put it. We've gone from the doldrums of the end of last season to being more positive around the draft and what we've actually done with the roster. Hard Knocks obviously helped, getting a little glimpse behind the scenes, which is something we never thought we would see with the Giants. And now we've got into training camp where reports have been kind of up and down. We've got Daniel Jones obviously coming off of his ACL tear, which doesn't help. He's looked rusty, which obviously doesn't help the narrative around him. The defensive backfield is still a question. But in the important places where we really struggled last season in offensive line, we've really toughened up that position. And like you said, Brian Burns, what an acquisition that is. And for what was touted as 2 firsts back in, last year, and even a first and something this year at the Senior Bowl, ended up being a fragment of that.
What was it? It was a 2, a 5, and a 5 for a 5, which is it's pennies on the dollar. I still can't quite believe it. Although you did give him top dollar in return on the contract, I think.
Yeah, which I think was always going to be the point. Early on in the Hard Knocks process, they kind of had a number in mind and they hit that number dead on from the first kind of conversations that were internal. So I don't think it was a fact that we've overpaid. I think they knew exactly what needed to be done. And let's be honest, if we can unlock Thibodeau and unlock Dex through getting Brian Burns, I don't care how much it costs, really.
And I mean, it's a very different looking depth chart. Like you said, you've invested in that offensive line. Runyon coming in. Thomas is obviously an absolute beast. If Schmitz can... Such a promising prospect, but maybe had a slightly disappointing season last year. Van Roten's obviously a very good player. Wide receiver was always kind of the point where it was kind of tough because for all Jones was running around there with, a porous offensive line, he also had very little to throw at. And Neighbours has come in. I mean, you've got Alan Robinson buried in the depth chart, Jalen Hyatt from last year's draft, Wandale Robinson's still there, Darius Slayton's maybe the best wide receiver 3 or a good wide receiver 2 in there as well. So there's a bit more to throw at.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is the fact that we actually do have a good wide receiver core, but because we didn't have a 1, it had a knock-on effect through the entire room. Now that we have the kind of alpha dog in Neighbours, who has been an absolute monster in training camp. I mean, today he was targeted 8 times and had 8 catches against, obviously, your boys, in amongst the fights, obviously, after that had settled. But now I think moving someone like Wandale, who can line up in the slot and be more of a wide receiver 2 in the slot, have someone like Slayton, who actually is under Hyatt in the depth chart. So for Slayton to come in as a 4, he's easily the best 4. And then you've got Jalen Hyatt, who I think struggled because everyone expected him to be the one with his speed last year, and now he's going to be a de facto 2-3. He'll be able to get open more often because he's not going to be tracked by the number 1 cornerback. So yeah, I think we had a good room. We just didn't have that alpha. Now we've got that. That's going to be a turning point, but it all hinges on one man really, and that's the man under center.
Yeah, Jalen Hyatt, I mean, we obviously know here with our backup quarterback about the limitations of that Tennessee offense and what it does to some of the offensive players, so I think it does take a while. Okay, you've alluded to him. Let's talk Daniel Jones. 2 years ago, contract year, balled out, convinced the man upstairs to give him a bumper contract, and then fell back down to earth. Who is Daniel Jones?
That's a good question that I think even we want answers for. Daniel Jones is a quarterback that was mismanaged through the first 3 years of his career, was brought up into a system that worked for him in year 1 under Dable, and then was buried by an offensive line that was more porous than a pack of sponges last year. So I still don't think we've seen the best of Daniel Jones. We've definitely seen the worst of Daniel Jones, and I'd really, really prefer not to see it again if possible. But I do believe that we haven't seen the best because, and I don't want to make it sound like we're making excuses. On the podcast, we're very kind of mixed on Daniel Jones. There's one of us who is out. I'm very much called out for being the fence sitter on it, and the other 2 guys are quite behind him. But the way that I look at it is, his offensive line has always been poor. Bobby Johnson is one of the worst offensive line coaches in the NFL, and I'm not sure how he stayed around for so long, seeing as he couldn't pick up his players couldn't pick up a stunt. He's never had an alpha wide receiver because we got rid of Beckham before he was there, and we tried replacing that with Kenny Golladay, that went so well. So thank you for him. And then after that, he hasn't had anyone really to throw to. We tried Darren Waller, that didn't work. Saquon, we ended up having to build the offense around, which probably didn't help Jones, because handing the ball off to Saquon, having to check down to Saquon on every play, doesn't really help his progression. So it's going to be interesting. This year is make or break, though. And I do believe to win over a vast majority of the Giants fan base, Jones almost needs to be perfect this year, and he won't be, because we're still young and we're still learning, and Dable's in charge of play calling. So he's got a lot to do, but it all depends on how it happens in real games and how that ACL holds up.
Okay. Sorry.
I was just going to quickly add on to this. So I've watched the Hard Knocks with the Giants in it, and I was quite surprised when they were talking about Daniel Jones. It almost seemed like the coaches were reticent on whether they'd given him too much money. They were openly questioning him and his fit there. And you look at us, our team, how we took Jared Goff on. Like, they like him. No one in the league believed in him. And our coaches have shown staunch, unwavering commitment to him from day 1 and given him an environment to succeed. Were you surprised watching Hard Knocks how little your coaching staff seem to believe in him? And if so, why are they I know money's a thing, but why are they going through the rigmarole trying to bother keeping him? It seems like they're already out on him. Like you said, he doesn't seem to be given the same opportunity. And if he's not getting believed in, surely it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it was pretty obvious that Brian Dable fell in love with Jaden Daniels during Hard Knocks, and was all in on getting Jaden Daniels. The problem is obviously Washington took him at number 2. They're in division. We're never going to do a deal with in division. We thought about Drake May, but it didn't feel like they loved him as much. Otherwise, they would have sold the house to get him. So I think that was probably a big wake-up call for Daniel, that obviously they were that kind of blasé about replacing him so early. It didn't matter if they replaced him or not, though. He was always going to be on the roster this season. I mean, his cap hit is astronomical, and to cut him just wouldn't have been an option. That said, I still don't think that he'll be on a short leash this year. I do think he'll get a longer leash than a lot of people think, and I've got a feeling that Brian Dable and Joe Shane have both come to the kind of conclusion that this is this year. It's Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones gets to show what he can do. If he can't do it, we can get out next year. If he really goes under, we're likely to be picking high. And if he plays well, that's what we kind of always wanted from him anyway. The worst thing for Giants fans, I think, really would be to go get 6 or 7 wins this year and be picking at like 16, 17, knowing full well that you're probably going to have to eat that Daniel Jones contract and get rid of him. And then who's out there? Dak Prescott's the man who keeps getting thrown around in Giant circles, but I'm not overly convinced. And I'm not sure who else will be out there next year.
So just to finish off this before we start talking briefly about training camp, what are your season's expectations thus far into this off season?
So difficult. It's like floor and ceiling, because it's been so hit and miss in training camp. The preseason will tell a lot. I do think we've got much better depth. I'd like to say that we beat the over under. I think I've seen the over under hit at 4.5. I've seen it at 6.5. The Giants are not believed in by a lot of people this year. I think we will surprise a few, but I don't think we'll be a playoff team. I do think even if Daniel Jones really does perform, we're just going to miss out.
Okay. And moving on to training camp, you were saying just before we went live that you've been talking to some people who've been at training camp. Obviously, it was an explosive first day of joint practices with what has been described by our beat reporters as an uncharacteristic number of fights, as in never seen this before in 10 years worth doing this. So what's that been like? What are you hearing? And also, there was a question in from a listener who is Brent DeWitt and says, what's your take on Daniel Jones jumping into the scrum, apparently defending his offensive line? I think it will make his teammates fight harder for him.
Yeah, so we'll go with the Daniel Jones one first. I'll answer that. We love it, apart from the fact that he might get injured. That is the scariest thing with Daniel Jones, because he's got a history of neck injuries. He's coming off an ACL repair. But the problem with Daniel Jones is that he's very beige. Like, he isn't the most exciting of players, and we've always wanted him to kind of show a bit. And the fact that he jumped in there, I think, showed a lot of Giants fans a little bit of something that they hadn't seen. On our podcast earlier, we were talking about bearded Daniel Jones and how we want him to keep the beard because for some reason it makes him a little bit of a maverick, and he actually is a bit interesting, as opposed to clean-shaven Daniel Jones, who's like, Eli Manning light, without some of the talent that Eli had. So it's interesting. I like it just because of the fact that he has been so boring in a way. So in the terms of the training camp today, apparently there were some really good plays and some really good intense battles between the teams that didn't end with fisticuffs. But from all you're right, from all intents and purposes, from what we've heard from beat writers and what we've read, some of them have said like they've been doing training camps since 2014. This is the hardest that they've seen two teams battle against each other. It's the most fights they've seen. It was uncharacteristically hot. Apparently, that was one issue. So it was hot. The players were getting annoyed, and they started taking it out on each other. I like it in a way because I think a lot of it came through one of our rookies in Drew Phillips, who got under the skin of St. Brown a couple of times and started a few of them. And I kind of like that there's a rookie doing that. But what the biggest takeaway for me is that the Giants for the last 2 years have been too polite. We've almost been that team where another team's player will punch one of ours in the face and everyone else walks away. And now we're looking at players who actually kind of give a damn about each other and have a bit of camaraderie. So that's what I want to see from the Giants this year. I want to see a team that cares about not just themselves, but each other.
Sounds a bit like Dayball. That sounds like Brian Dayball. So the fact that that hasn't been the case and it is now, I guess, is an encouraging sign. It feels weird to me, just to finish this conversation off, that your season expectations are perhaps lower than last year's final tally of wins, because for my money, apart from McKinney going, I think you're a better team. I like the investments that you've made. I like the draft picks. So it's weird, and maybe it's a case of just other teams getting better more quickly. I don't know, but I kind of like it. I do feel like Dayball's he's got to be on a bit of a hot seat here.
I don't think he's on a hot seat at all. I think that's a narrative that a lot of people will jump on, but I think what Dayball has brought in the terms of culture, if you compare it to what we were like under Joe Judge and Pat Shermer, it's night and day. And from what you saw on Hard Knocks, Joe Shane and John Mara are big fans of Dayball, and he's actually been able to build a pretty good coaching staff around him. Just considering the fact we've got new defensive coordinator, technically a new offensive coordinator because it's him rather than Mike Kafka, new special teams coordinator, new offensive line coach. It's a very big reset. It does, from the outside looking in, look like it's all chips on the table, like all in. But I do think it's a slow build, and I just don't want to see another head coach be fired so quickly, because after Coughlin, we've just gone through them way, way too quickly.
Can't feel like him as you do about McAdoo. I mean, there's a lot more there. So I hope for his sake and for your sake that he stays, because I have a bit of belief in this team. Many thanks to Todd Nesbitt for the $30 super chat, and says, do you know all the teams that are going to be playing an exhibition and when's our first live game? That's why we're doing this. That is exactly why we're doing this. Craig, representing the New York Giants, we're facing them on Thursday night, and we'll go through the rest of them now. But thanks, Todd, for the super chat. Much, much appreciate that. Craig, we're going to sign off from the Giants now, so thank you very much. Unless Neil or Simon, you have anything to ask our Giants guy before we move on?
No, nothing from me.
I thought that was really interesting. I just thought it was interesting that in some ways it seems like the Lions are kind of a textbook that the Giants could follow in this extended rebuild. So there's an interesting mirror between those teams. So just interested in hearing you guys talk.
Yeah,
no, agreed.
Absolutely. All right. Moving on to game number 2, and it's Lions at the Chiefs, which is on Saturday, August 17th, which is at 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. UK time. And the Chiefs, Neil, we spoke last year about going back to back. Before we go into what's changed, I mean, what a time it is to be a Chiefs fan, mate.
I've been a fan for 30 years, and I've seen some terrible, terrible teams, and I'm just loving every second of this.
And so, I mean, arguably, it's one of Patrick Mahomes' I don't want to say worst years, but he made the absolute one of his worst
accurate.
seasons.
Yeah, I would go along with that. It wasn't entirely his fault, but
no.
Yes.
And yet the defense came to play. Spagnuolo, again, is the best defensive coordinator in the league, and it's not even close. And one of the things that Mahomes didn't have going for him is he didn't have particularly much in the way of wide receivers, and you've addressed that in the draft with Xavier Worthy coming in, which is a pretty tasty prospect, but also Marquise Brown coming in as well. What are your thoughts about what the offense might look like this season?
I think it's hoping to go back to more like it was when Tyreek Hill was here and use the speed of Worthy and Brown to stretch the defense back so that they can't sit on the intermediate routes, and then you just throw to Kelsey and Rashee Rice all day. Take a couple of deep shots every now and again just to keep defenses honest and keep them pinned back, and let everyone work underneath, and good luck stopping it.
Yeah, good luck indeed. But you've also, got some pretty nice value in getting Kingsley Suamataia, who a lot of people were talking about being like a fringe first rounder, which I don't think we never really believed in that necessarily. I know, Ant, you were in particular didn't like him at that spot, shall we say. I suppose I didn't like him at all. But, a lot of people think that you got really good value there. And Jared Wiley was one of only very few tight ends to get some good smoke. So how's the training camp been for you guys so far?
It's been quite quiet, to be honest. Like, there's not really many roster spots up for grabs. Like, the vast majority of them are pretty set in stone. Like, there is something of a battle at left tackle between Wanya Morris and Suamatia, but to be honest, I don't see Morris taking that job, so it's kind of Suamatia's to lose. Morris will probably end up being the swing tackle, maybe filling in at guard a bit as well if needed. He's played a little left guard in camp as well. Maybe wide receiver 7 if they're going to keep 7 wide receivers. There's a bit of buzz about who that might be, but that's kind of the level of problems that we have at the moment. The rest of the roster is just, it is what it is. It's not going to change.
And you guys have had a bit of transition on the defense, I guess it's fair to say. Obviously, Sneed was traded, and you, what else did we have here? Willie Gay moved on as well. Is there any trepidation on that side of the ball, or is it just we've managed to reload on defense before Spagnuolo gets the best out of these guys, so it's all faith here?
As far as Sneed goes, they were never going to pay him the kind of money that he wanted. They do have Watson and Williams, who are both very capable, very physical, in the same mold that Sneed was. So they've just let the two of those kind of fight it out for snaps. I don't know that there's going to be a clear winner. It may well be the two of them just rotate in and out. But Sneed was good last season, but he still wasn't the best cornerback on the roster. That was McDuffie. That wasn't particularly close either. He's a hell of a player. So Sneed is a loss, but not a huge loss. I think Willie Gay might be a bit more of a loss just because our linebacker depth looks a bit sparse. The starting 3 of Chanel, Bolton and Tranquil is a good 3, but once you get past that, there's really not a great deal. And Bolton's got an elbow injury in training camp. If you're going to have an injury, now's the time to have it because you get reps for whoever else is going to be taking that place, be it Jack Cochran or Cam Jones or whoever. But I think if we have one weakness, linebacker, but as you said, Spags is so good, he can hide whoever he wants to hide in there.
And, I won't talk too much about the Lions winning week 1 last year, but it seemed to set you on a good start to the rest of the year. You guys have one of the hardest starts to a league season that I've seen in some time. You're not a team that starts particularly hot. Is there any trepidation that you've got your... it's not going to be that you can maybe play your worst and still take a few wins out of that start?
This is going to sound really arrogant and presumptive.
You've deserved it at this point.
But that is the point, is that it's almost a case that the regular season doesn't really matter. The season starts in January for us. Last season we had the hardest playoff run in history according to DVOA. We played the Dolphins, who were a good team. We had to go on the road to the Bills, beat them. We had to go on the road to the Ravens, beat them. It was no cakewalk, and they still, even though they weren't playing particularly well, still got to Super Bowl and still won it. So I'm not even sure they need the number 1 seed. My aim this season is not to get worked up over regular season losses. It just, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because playoff Chiefs is a very different team to regular season Chiefs. And Andy and Spags save all the good stuff for the playoffs. They're not going to use it when we play the Bills in week 13 or whatever it is. They're not going to use it against the Ravens in week 1. You might set them up with a few plays where they're going to get a look now that they're going to get the same look later on and be a completely different play. But in reality, the regular season doesn't matter. It pains me to say it, but at the same time, it's a it's a good place to be in, but we start in January.
It gives a level of confidence that we all can aspire to, I guess. The AFC seems to get continually harder. And I just wonder, I know what you're saying, but clearly there is a big advantage to playing in Arrowhead, and getting that number 1 seed or number 2 seed at least has got to be crucial. And, you know, that Texans team just looks so damn good right now with how they did last year, as well as, you know, everyone else that could be good in that conference. You're not fussed that either which way.
The Texans kind of snuck into the playoffs. They needed to win the last game or two of the season, and then they got hosed by Baltimore. So let's hold off on anointing them as the next big thing just for now, shall we? The Ravens lost about 13 players in free agency and replaced them with Derrick Henry, who's like 150 years old and has 1 million carries. So I think they'll probably take, and they lost their defensive coordinator, which I think is going to be a massive thing. So I think they'll take a slight step back. Buffalo shipped off all their elder statesman players, and now they've got a load of youngsters in there. I think they take a step back. Who knows what the Bengals are? Miami. They've been the same the past 2 seasons. I don't see why they're going to be any different. They'll have a great regular season until about week 14 and then fall apart. So
you didn't mention the Steelers.
I don't really care.
Just leave the Steelers, right?
Yeah. There is nobody in the AFC that I wouldn't back us against in a one-on-one playoff game. Nobody.
Yeah, makes sense. Guys, any questions for Neil?
No, I mean, it sounds like Neil's as confident as he should be. The whole division's chasing the Chiefs for now, and I think that's the storyline of this season, really, right, guys? Is can anyone kind of catch up to the Chiefs? Not just, you know, this season, but in a more holistic sense. Like, are we going to get a real contender to this Chiefs dynasty? You know, we thought it was the Bills in the early stages. It was obviously Tom Brady's Patriots in the late era, and you know, who's going to step up to that plate next? Will it be Joe Burrow, or will it be Justin Fields and the Pittsburgh Steelers? We'll find out.
Oh, as a Lions fan, I really want Justin Fields to work in Pittsburgh because it would just stick it in the eye of Chicago. It'd be so funny.
It would be pretty funny.
It'd be excellent. Neil, on training camp and the game that we're going to go into, is there anything that you're sort of expecting from that? Because if you haven't got too many positions up for grabs, but I presume not many of your starters are going to play, I presume you're not putting much stock at all in that game.
No, I put no stock in preseason whatsoever. You'll see nothing but the ultimate beige game plan. You'll probably see featured the players that they've got an excess of and want to trade. So watch out for Nico Remigio, wide receiver 7. He's a good receiver. Like, he'll get a game somewhere. I doubt very much it'll be with us. They might try and force feed Sky Moore to get him off the books because he's been underwhelming for 3 years. If you could get him a 100-yard game in preseason, then someone might take a flyer on him. But I mean, that is the extent of preseason for us.
We'll do our best on that point. Are you going out to any games this year?
Week 1 against the Ravens.
Sounds fantastic. At Arrowhead, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. I hope you enjoy it, Neil. Thank you so much for coming on to talk Chiefs with us, and maybe we'll see you in February.
Well, I have money on that.
You actually?
I do, yes.
Oh, new best friends.
So when I talked to you guys this time last year, I said that I felt you needed to lose the NFC Championship game before you could win one.
I didn't want you to bring it up. I remember that before we started.
And I think that the experience you gained blowing the lead in San Francisco is going to stand you in good stead this season. And I think you'll make the Super Bowl, but I'll go back to the same point again. I think you have to lose the Super Bowl before you think about winning one.
Well, I mean, if you're telling me that we'll win it in year 3 of us talking about it and we'll lose it this coming year, I'm going to take it. Thank you so much for coming on, talking Chiefs, and many thanks as well to Jeff Hurley with a $10 super sticker as well. Thank you very much, man. Neil, amazing to talk to you as always.
Cheers, Matt. Thanks.
To Simon of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Thank you for coming on again, man. Saturday, 24th of August, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, our earliest game, and thank God, a reasonable time to watch a football match. How have things been for you? Because it has been, I mean, we're saying it's an active off-season for every team, but for you more than most, I mean, a quarterback out, 2 in, upheaval, and a team that never seems to have a losing season.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, don't let Omar Khan catch you saying that we only got 2 quarterbacks in. He loves mentioning that Kyle Allen is new as well.
Oh, God.
It's so strange, man. I mean, this is and John Reese Plumley, our 4th string UDFA. This is the first time we've ever had 4 new quarterbacks just descend onto the roster out of nowhere. So it's definitely all changing Pittsburgh, man, as you say, and there's a lot going on. I just wanted to mention to you guys as well. I mean, I've been teased a little bit about coming back on this show. I don't know if you guys probably don't know this history lore about the UK Steelers podcast is that I'm a bit of a closet Seahawks fan. When I first got into the NFL, it was kind of that era of Seahawks, 49ers, 2012, 2013. That was my favorite game of all time, was that 2013, 2012 NFC Championship game with the Crabtree Sherman interception. And so that's been a long running theme. And over the recent years, of course, I've kind of, eared closer and closer to the Lions. And there's some jokes going on our show that this might be the thing that pushes me over straight into the Lions fandom in the NFC. So
Come, we'll have you for sure.
yeah, listen, first it was the Sun God because he was my boy coming out of that draft. And when you took Sam Laporte, I mean, it was over for me.
and how right you were. I mean, not a lot of people saw it coming apart from everyone who said, yeah, I had them as a good player too. And I feel like that with Roman Wilson this year at Michigan.
Yeah.
Like, everyone was like, oh, this is going to be a really good player. Sits to the back of the 3rd round. You end up picking him up alongside what I think was, correct me if I'm wrong, Ant, was this our favourite draft of them all? With Fautano and Frazier and Wilson, Peyton Wilson, Mason McCormick.
It was my favorite draft class. Don't know about you, but
No, it
by
was-
far and away, it was my favorite one.
It feels like you have... We were big fans of McCormick in the pre-draft process, so for us it was 3 starters potentially out on that offensive line, which needed a little bit of work
Oh, yeah.
for you guys. So what's the new draft picks been like? Because you needed to restock a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we actually saw, it's not saying a lot, but we saw improved play out of the offensive line last season. It had been, it'd been a strength throughout the Big Ben years, and then I think it kind of gradually became a weakness as these kind of things start to even out with the salary cap and whatnot. And we've just never quite been able to kind of match that offense and defense at the same time. I think a lot of around the league and especially in Pittsburgh, people were excited that the Steelers, maybe more excited than most teams would be, had drafted 3 offensive linemen. Like you say, 2 that we expect to start pretty early doors in Fautano and Frazier. And then, of course, Mason McCormick, who you said, who excites me. I mean, any big guard with a neck roll, I mean, that's an easy scouting evaluation, right? Come on, guys. He's a lot of fun. He ran in there and defended Justin Fields apparently on sort of day 2 of training camp we've been having a lot of fights ourselves. We don't need other teams, we just do it ourselves. And yeah, he was the first one to charge over and knock over one of our linebackers who hit Justin Fields. So excited about the draft picks. As you said, Roman Wilson as well had an high ankle sprain first few days of camp. It was the first day of pads actually. And we were a little bit worried about that. Sounds like he's going to be all right for the start of the season, but with rookie receivers, especially, it can definitely be tough if they, miss that first training camp. So eyes on that one, especially because we could do with big things out of him having a pretty weak wide receiver core.
Just having a look at the rest of your transactions, I mean, well, you brought back Miles Killebrew, who's one of the players after my own heart, being a Lions special teams legend.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, forget he came from the Lions. Yeah, I mean, punt block specialist for us, dude.
Absolutely. He's so good. But Patrick Queen's come in on a heck of a chunk of change, and got a couple of others. Cordarrelle Patterson, who we know very well from being in division for some time. Van Jefferson, looking for some kind of wide receiver depth, because for all you guys have done actually quite well out of the wide receivers you have, because as soon as they seem to leave Pittsburgh, they turn to absolute shit. But you guys have also needed to restock there too.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird situation right now with the Steelers. Obviously, Arthur Smith has come in, replacing the Matt Canada toilet bowl signing facade that was going on for the last couple of years. So it does feel like we've been saying on the podcast. It feels like there's like an adult in the room again. With the Pittsburgh offense, and that's kind of been echoed with what some of the players have said as well. And I think you started to feel that, but within that, especially when you're talking about receivers and things, is we expect that an Arthur Smith style system. You think back to what we've seen with the Titans and the Falcons. This is going to be a very run heavy system. With Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, big investment in the O line. We're going to zig when the NFL's zagging, if you can still say that about the passing offenses. We got two QBs now in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who obviously we know can either extend the game or just straight up put it on the legs in the case of Justin Fields in this day and age. So, we shall see. But this offense, we're hoping, is not going to run through the receiver position, and we're hoping that we can kind of bring defenses down the field, stack the box, try and stop the run, and that's when you unleash a guy like George Pickens who can catch something with his pinky finger.
I mean, taking another leaf out of the Lions playbook, I guess, with the offensive line and trying to go first through the run with Gibbs and Montgomery in a double-headed monster. So, again, familiarity with what we're familiar with. You mentioned and alluded to the quarterback situation, and all the way through the off-season pre-training camp, it's, right, this is going to be Russell Wilson's team. Russell Wilson's a starter. Russell's going to do this and do that. And then all of the smoke throughout all of the training camp process has been, look how good Justin Fields is. But we know what happens on Twitter. It's a load of people tracking the touchdowns and interceptions of every rookie quarterback and new acquisition that anyone has. I mean, if you just go on there now, I'm sure you can see what Caleb Williams has done. And, JJ McCarthy's outplaying Caleb Williams. Who cares?
It's irrelevant,
Is it real with Justin Fields? Like, does he actually look that good? Because there are some nice throws out there, and I would say maybe nicer throws than some of the nice throws that I've seen from other quarterbacks that are getting blown up. I mean, Hendon Hooker has had an amazing training camp, according to some people, when he's actually been terrible. Well, not terrible, but he's been up and down at best, shall we say. So, Justin Fields, real?
Yeah, it's all spin at this time of year, right? And obviously the situation in Pittsburgh right now is that Russell Wilson has picked up what we presume is a minor injury during a workout on a sled before pads came on. And so he's not really been around for team drills, and he's not really gotten a lot of reps yet. And that's given Justin Fields this opportunity, I think, to kind of step on, integrate himself with the first team offense, and kind of build a bit of that momentum in training camp. And I've always been on the boat that this really isn't a competition, that this is Russ's job. The problem I've always said is that my fear, I don't know if this is even a fear so much as just what I'm conjecturing might happen. Steelers fans have been very quick to call for certain QBs' heads, and quite rightly in recent years. And when you bring a guy like Justin Fields, who's as exciting as he is, for better or worse, whatever you think of him, he's a guy who's going to inspire a lot of excitement. And the prospect of him sitting on the bench is in some ways probably more valuable to some fans than him on the field, in the sense that they're going to be calling for him as soon. I mean, we've got a very difficult back end of the schedule. The back end of the schedule is insane for the Steelers. It's really a run of all the division teams, which we know are tough, and a few others thrown in there as well. So we need to get off to a good start. And you could see a situation where if Russell Wilson struggles in the first few weeks, you might start seeing a real call for Justin Fields, especially after what we've seen out of him this training camp, because he has looked good. My question is just that we've seen Justin Fields kind of look like this in training camps previous with the Bears. I think we've even seen him play like this, and he's looked great. But he still has accuracy issues. I still don't think he's there 110%. The ideal for the Steelers here is that we get Russell Wilson on the field. We kind of see if he can improve under this new system compared to where he was in Denver, because I think his performance at the end of his time in Denver is maybe a little bit underrated by some. Not that I'm going to claim he's still the greatest quarterback in the NFL or anything like that, but I think he can do a job. And I just think they want a bit of, just sustainability at the start of the season and just smooth things out and see what they've got in Justin Fields. And I really think that if Justin Fields comes in, it's maybe more of a break case in case of emergency rather than, really a plan that's come in from the start of the season. Look, you only need to look at Kenny Pickett last preseason. We won 3 straight preseason games and he looked amazing on offense. So I don't think it means a great deal.
No, I think you join all of us in not putting a great deal of stock in preseason. Actually, maybe less than everyone.
I've got a question.
Go for it.
Is your best case scenario that Russell Wilson plays badly and Fields gets the job? Because otherwise, if Wilson plays kind of decent, you're going to have to pay him $40 million a year, and that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I don't think Russell Wilson has a route to get paid by this team. I mean, it could happen if he plays out, out of his socks at age whatever he is, mid-30s at this point. Maybe he secures a couple of years deal to keep, especially if Justin Fields doesn't show anything or doesn't get the opportunity to show anything. But I do think that the plan here is we roll Russell Wilson out here on his current contract. We let this play out, and when the time comes, we hand the baton to Justin Fields and see what we've got. Now we've only got Justin Fields for this year technically, so we'll have to see how that goes financially. Will he get the opportunity to prove himself? Will he sign an extension? Will he look to go to free agency again? Sorry, not that he ever did. We traded for him, but so it'll all depend, won't it? But for me, I don't know. Best outcome. I mean, the best outcome is that Justin Fields win this job and looks great. I mean, he's the younger QB. He's the guy you can secure and lock up probably for the cheaper price at least in the medium term. So, I mean, that's the best case scenario. But I think where we are now is the Steelers are looking for a way to get out of this post-Ben malaise that we've found ourselves in. A lot of teams find, the Giants, we were just talking about it. Unfortunately, haven't been successful in it as the Steelers have in managing to maintain these winning seasons still. But, that makes it tough, as he was saying, drafting 16th, 17th, 20th every season. Sometimes you only get a Kenny Pickett, and you've got to try and kind of deal with that. So, personally, to answer your question, I'm rooting for a Justin Fields win. I would love that. I think that's the best case scenario of this training camp, but I think Russell Wilson it's still his job. I don't even think it's possible for him to really lose it. We're having debates about this on the podcast. Some of us do think, I know the national vibe is that Justin Fields can win this job. I still think it would take maybe an injury for, longer term for Russell Wilson not to start the season.
And just moving away from this just very briefly, because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention maybe Ant's favourite player in the 2023 draft, Keanu Benton.
Keanu Benton. Yeah.
How did he do last year?
Yeah, he had a great season, man. It's tough for D linemen, I think, sometimes coming in the first year. It's such a physical, obviously, tough position. And he's a guy who we really liked in the preseason process, especially one of the guys. Shout out to Mark Hansen, my co-host on the UK Steelers podcast. Really, it was his boy. We all have boys. I'm sure you guys do as well. Amon Ra's one of mine. Sam Laporta's one of mine. Well, Keanu Benton was definitely one of Mark Hansen's boys, and I really liked him as well. I thought he really held up well at the line of scrimmage last season, and I think he's got a little bit of move and a little bit of pass rush to him for a D lineman, which is always nice to see. He can cause a little bit of havoc up the middle. And we've struggled in recent years. Obviously, Cam Hayward we all love, but we've struggled with a bit of that D line sort of depth, and especially kind of getting that nose tackle. Who can really enforce his will at the line of scrimmage. We lost, obviously, Stephon Tuitt in unfortunate circumstances, and then we've kind of rotated around a few of these guys. We had Isaiah Bugs for a while, obviously, who went to you guys. And I know,
his career's done great since.
Yeah. We seem to have a few of these issues, don't we?
Between he went to Neil's team. He went to the Chiefs and had a great time.
Briefly, very briefly.
Yeah, maybe we should stop trading these players around.
This was the Isaiah Bugs Memorial Podcast.
So I've forgotten the train of thought that I was on, but
nose tackles. I think.
Oh yeah, Keanu Benton. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, but yeah, I'm really excited about Keanu Benton. I'm glad that you guys have keyed into him as another guy because he's been a great watch, and I think he's a mainstay on that Steelers defense. When you get a rookie, even if it's not a first round rookie, and you start to feel the team just even in media and little things just start to like a little bit of emphasis on this guy. I think they are keying in on him as being a guy that is going to get a second contract and can start to build around, hopefully, if he has a good sophomore year.
And I wasn't overselling that, was I? He was one of your guys.
Steelers pick a lot of my guys. The Steelers are what will probably be my second team right now. I can predict the Steelers drafts. I predict Najee Harris 2 years ago. I got that right. I said you were going to get a center this year, although you went around later than I thought you were going to do. But Fautonu slipped, so can't really blame you for that one. But you can see what they're doing here, right? Zach Frazier was center for the third best rushing offense in the FBS last year. Mason McCormick was guard for the fifth best rushing offense in the FCS last year. Like, these guys are getting in run ballers to go and work, which is why I think it would be more beneficial for them to have Justin Fields in, because he runs the ball better than Russell does. And I think, he's a better passer than he's been made out to be. I'm glad you took him, because I love Justin Fields coming out of college. And then, of course, I had to hate him because he played for the Bears and I didn't get a choice in the matter. I can cheer him again now. But it's very obvious to see the identity the Steelers building this year. This year. You took my NC State captain as well. Like, you just take all... like, Peyton Wilson. Will love Peyton Wilson. I loved Peyton Wilson. 4 years, admiring that man. He's an absolute... you see the pantheon of Steelers linebackers. His name's going to be up there, providing that shoulder stays intact, he's going to be right at the top of that list by the time he's done. I don't know, I just love what the Steelers do and how they think. They're my sort of team, not the Lions.
Yeah, Peyton Wilson, man, he's throwing himself around at training camp. He looks legit. I mean, like you said, I was watching tape of him before the draft, and I couldn't believe when I turned on his tape. I was like, "Whoa, okay, what's the deal with this guy? Like, why are we not talking more about this guy?" And obviously, you hear about the ACL, doesn't have an ACL in one of his knees, and the shoulder
Yeah.
issues, and he has had some injury issues. But yeah, the guy flies around, and we're sensitive to that, in Pittsburgh because we do feel like we kind of lost a Hall of Fame level player for a generation there in Ryan Shazier. Who we really think was that kind of next generation of sideline to sideline elite level mover linebacker, and that was such a heartbreaking loss. And so it'd be great if we can get a guy like that who can really come. And we've struggled with coverage linebackers in recent years, so yeah, it'd be great if he could do a bit of all of it.
Yeah, he'll fit the bill. Playing right behind Benton as well. It's like
Yeah.
you are building my favorite defense. So like they're going to hit people hard. I know that. If they can get a competent offense, that defense can stymie just about anybody on its day. And the guys
Yeah.
they've got is just amazing.
I keep saying, man, they've got like not many defenses, I think, in the league, if any can say this. They've got really a star player at every level of the field. Now, there's definitely holes. But in every position room, I would say you've now got a star player. You've got a Cam Hayward on the D line. You've got obviously TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Maybe people in the national media aren't as looked into this. I don't quite know. He's an elite player. That's two outside linebackers you've got there. Then you've got, as you say, the linebacker core. Maybe is your argument where there's not a star player, but I think last season Landon Roberts was an elite linebacker. Maybe elite is a strong word. I'm using it too liberally, but he was a great linebacker in terms of what he did for us after some injuries. You've got Minka Fitzpatrick on the back end, and Joey Porter Jr. is a name to look out for, obviously, after his rookie season. He looked really great on an island last season in a really, what could have been an awful secondary for us if he had not stepped up. So, yes. Another question at the back of the class.
So, oh, cheers, Neil. So I might be wrong here, but like the guys and me, we have a big disagreement when it comes to things. I hate hybrid defenders. I do. I like playing guys where they're meant to be played, and it seems with the Steelers, I know like your defense, you can move the guys around, but it seems like they just put the best players in the best position to succeed, and they make it work, and they don't faff around too much with what they're doing there. Would that be an agreement that you have? The guys they have are just really good. They utilize them where they're best, or do not, or maybe not. I feel like the Steelers are an old-fashioned team who put the guys where they're good, and they're just great because of that.
Yeah, I think that when you see the Steelers defense succeed, that is why it comes down to a little bit of that simplicity. And one of the areas you've seen frustration amongst Steelers fans and supporters in recent years is when you see a guy like TJ Watt not rushing the passer and instead backpedaling, and attempting to cover a guy in the flat, and stuff like that. TJ Watt is perhaps the best defensive player I've ever watched, and yet he is not a guy that you want covering the tight end on the flat. Unfortunately, we have seen and that's just we've spoke a lot at ends. My co-host Gav is great with his scheme stuff, and we've spoke a lot about this in terms of what's the cause of it. And for a better conversation, go listen to the some of those shows with Gav and listen to our show because he's got great insights on this. But the long and short of it is that I think you have a 3-4 defense where you just not so many teams running the base 3-4 these days. You're gonna have to have situations and times in certain areas of the game, situational play calling, where these linebackers have to drop back and they have to be able to do everything. And I think that's why you've seen us bring in faster linebackers like Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, guys that can maybe cover a little bit more of the field to take some of that off guys like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, because they should be pinning their ear back. We're sick of hearing PFF say, "Oh, pass rush win rate, Myles Garrett." Great. Listen, TJ Watt he's wasting his time back there. If he's rushing the passer every down, listen, Michael Strahan, see you later. TJ Watt, 40 sacks a season. Come on.
You mentioned it very quickly there, but how like satisfying was it flipping Patrick Queen from Baltimore?
Do you know we do this so much? It's funny. In the media, there's been a bit of back and forth. It always happens, right, when teams go from one team to another that are rivals. And Patrick Queen's been saying the city's better than Baltimore, and Mike Hilton has come out saying things.
Well, I mean, so we had a guy go to the Baltimore game last year who said it was the scariest experience he's ever had. So I don't doubt the thing about Baltimore versus Pittsburgh, to be honest.
Yeah, I only drove through Maryland for that reason. Yeah, so listen, it's interesting. You have, I think the AFC North. Maybe you tell me that the NFC North is like this as well, but it feels very incestuous in the AFC North. A lot of guys seem to choose to go to the Bengals or the Ravens after they leave us and vice versa. Obviously, nobody wants to go to the Browns. They're like the Jags. They just take whoever costs the most. So that was tongue in cheek. So, I don't know. It's interesting, and it's a fun division for that reason. It's very chippy. We really don't like the Bengals. I get the sense, even as a team, down to the player level. Bit of respect with the Ravens, of course, and the Browns. Well, we don't talk about the Browns.
Just to wrap up this conversation, we had a question from the chat talking about your over-under, and I was going to talk about your season expectations anyway. So it's 8.5 because obviously the Steelers can't have a losing season, so 8-1 is kind of your thing right now. But it feels like you guys you've been kind of going through this transition where you're still in a sort of competitive rebuild, sort of, like with aspirations of higher, but that's kind of what it has been. And that now maybe you're coming out of the other side where maybe, Wilson's a bridge to Fields here, is kind of what I feel like you were saying. Does it feel like you were on the way up? And, I mean, would you ever bet against you guys having a losing season by now? Because I'm surely not.
Yeah, there's no reason to bet on the under for that, is there? Until we see evidence to the contrary. Mike Tomlin's show. I mean, the weird thing is, and what I've been saying is that Steelers seasons don't seem to go the way you expect. You look at the schedule today, and like I said, it looks like slightly easier start to the year, and then a back half of the schedule that's really tough. And what'll end up happening, no doubt, is that the Steelers will have an awful start to the year. Then they'll go on a rampage and beat all these great teams at the back end of the season, and end up with a 9-8 record, as you say. It's almost destined to the stars, it feels like. But to answer your question, I do think the Steelers have improved. I think that they are, like I say, we're in this kind of post-Ben malaise. Without getting too much into it, I spoke on it recently, just that it does feel like Ben, for all the love that we have for him, is not the kind of guy that, wanted the guy he had to mentor. We saw with the Mason Rudolph stuff. Didn't want the guy he had to mentor in the building. That was not the kind of guy Ben is. And, fair enough, you take the rough with the smooth with these players, right? And he had an ego to him. And so I think that set us on a bit of a delay in the sense that when Ben was gone, it was very much like there is no Jordan Love waiting in the wings. There's no real plan here. We're kind of locked down. We have to take a Kenny Pickett. And that set us on this kind of delay. And I think it's really testament to Tomlin's skill that he's been able to kind of navigate us through some tough situations and tough waters there and still doesn't have a losing season. But on what that doesn't tell you is that Steelers fans, especially in Pittsburgh, and, you start to get that vibe, it's really time for a playoff win. It's been a good few years now. Obviously, we've got that Cleveland wildcard losses the last time in the playoffs and then a couple of years without. So it's now starting to get to the point where I'm worried about. We already see calls for Tomlin's head every offseason, and I find it a little bit silly. But eventually you start to get accused of stagnation, and that's where we are right now with the Steelers, because we keep finding ourselves in this kind of like, are we going to make the last wildcard spot in the AFC? Are we going to just fall short? And that's where we are because of some of the great QBs in the AFC.
So this kind of answers what I was going to say, but it is 2016 since they last won a playoff game. That is 8 years.
Crazy, yeah.
Like, is it not getting to a point now where the winning season record is almost becoming detrimental to this team long term? Isn't it time that either they went for it, especially in you're in one of the toughest divisions in football right now. Like, is there not a point where you've got to go for it, or you've got to say, right, this is where we tear it down? Because at this point, these personal accolades are just not worth it anymore because they'll fall behind otherwise.
Yeah, I think I've got a bit of a different philosophy on this to a lot of people. I know that it seems like the only conventional wisdom in the NFL right now is that you can either be in your window where you're attacking for the Super Bowl, or you can be in your rebuild where you're trying to tank and get the first overall pick. And I just look at it and I don't really view that as the only way to win in the NFL. I mean, we've seen, it's not the way you guys have really done. I mean, obviously you guys had a lot of early picks, but Jared Goff it's a bit of a weird situation with you guys because we could argue Aiden Hutchinson, I suppose. But you know what I mean? Maybe a better example is the Chiefs. They didn't kind of tank and wait until they had the first overall pick. They moved up. They grabbed Patrick Mahomes at 11 that season, I think, or 12, and and the rest is history. So look, I think the Steelers are the organization they are because they aren't interested in playing the meta game of the NFL, and I like that about them personally. And if that means that we're subjected to a long period here of 9-win seasons, then so be it. But I really don't think that's. I don't think us picking 20th every year really is the only reason that we are kind of in this little stagnant. Like I say, I think there's a lot of pass to it. I think there's a lot with Ben. I think a lot of the mind share is stagnated over time, and I'm hoping we'll see that change with a new OC, like I said, in Arthur Smith, because we've seen a lot of internal promotions in recent years that have kind of stagnated some of the think tank energy of the team. So I don't know, maybe is it a cop out to your question? Maybe, but I just don't view it as the reason, for the Steelers' stagnation.
I mean, even
no, wrong. I'm anti-tank. Like, I believe winning games becomes a mentality, and you have to get there. But I guess when the situation is when it's 8 years, and then it like because the Lions got accused of that for a while. They didn't lose enough games to be bad, like to go down. But then they also kind of it just feels like that's where they are now. And I'm not saying they should go that way, but it does seem like something needs to change because, like you say, you are just sort of skimming the surface at the minute and not. You've seen Cincy go up there and do it now. You've seen Baltimore go up there and do it. It's a tough division. Like something somewhere has to change. Tomlin's good, but it just. What would you say then? Like, what is the thing in the organization that really needs to change? If it's not like tanking to get high draft picks or anything, like what is it they haven't done that has sort of kept them in the middle and they've just not advanced upwards that you want to see change?
Honestly, I think we're already in the early years of that change occurring. I think you look at Kevin Colbert, the previous GM, stepping down after a long time at the helm, and he did a fantastic job. And we've had some debates on the show since he's left about kind of his tenure. And actually, when you look at some of the moves that were made towards the end of it, did that maybe put us in a bit of a detrimental spot? And you look at the Najee pick and the Kenny pick, and we can debate those and some of the trades and signings that were done towards the end. And I think those are fair criticisms. As one of the guys in our show, shout out to Ketz, who has been very critical of Colbert's tenure. But what I think you're seeing is Omar Khan's come in. We've seen a very different strategy to free agency, to re-signings, to a modernization, I would say, in the approach to scouting. Just a bit of the Steelers are a very old school organization. PFF hate us because we're one of the only ones that won't really buy into the shtick. This is a team that does not kind of just do whatever the rest of the league will do, for better or for worse. And I think sometimes that is great, and I think sometimes that bites us on the ass. But I think what Omar Khan has done as kind of the figurehead of football operations and now the GM is just kind of, I don't know, modernize the team, just provide a bit of a different vibe. And I really do feel like we'd stagnated in such a way that I think Mike Tomlin's a great coach, an exceptional people manager, a great people motivator. Maybe, I'm sure you hear the same things. Maybe not a great game time decision guy. But I think what he does well and the value he brings can't be spoken to enough. So I think these people that say, well, just get, we need to get rid of Tomlin and to get new ideas. I don't know that really is a compelling answer to me. I think what you really want to do is find a guy who can delegate and get what Tomlin does and do what he does best, and then pick up some of the slack elsewhere. And I've been really, really impressed. And you see it through draft season if you watch all of the press conferences after the drafts and stuff. Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin's relationship is really, really great. And I think that's a key to moving on and progressing now. And I think that Tomlin's had some of the power of the organization taken away from him softly a little bit, not in like a dramatic Bill Belichick way, but just in the sense that I think maybe he's focused now on what he needs to and what he does best. And player personnel is maybe a little bit more in the Omar Khan hands, even though it's all a team obligation with those two. But yeah, so I don't know. Again, is it a cop-out answer? I don't know. I'm saying nothing needs to change, maybe, but
I think why we ask.
Yeah, I think we're in the early stages of the change that you're describing, and I hope that we'll start to see. I don't think Kevin Colbert would have brought in Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Let's put it that way.
I mean,
Sorry, and this is the thing. Like, you draft well. Like, you draft incredibly good players. Like, you're like us. You draft physical players. You draft an identity, and that's why it just seems confusing as to why they're not just like making the steps forward with it. But
it's what those steps are, right? It's so tough. I mean, I think about the time that I've been following the Steelers, and we had that great Killer Bee offense, and it was so frustrating because it was so fun to watch with AB and Brown and Bell. and it was just the defense sucked at that time. You had Mike Mitchell and Ross Cockrell starting in the secondary, and it was just complete garbage. And then when the defense starts to get invested in and built in, we just kind of missed that window, and they weren't quite able to get it done. And now you've got, of course, problems with the offense, and you're trying to invest in that. And that's the way of the NFL, that's the way of the salary cap, that's the way the league's set up. And that's why I've expressed some concern and some frustration at kind of the way the Rams did it, for example, when I claimed they sold out a little bit to win a Super Bowl. But hey, it worked for them, and they played the meta game, and fair play. And we've had some arguments on the show about that. I don't love it. But it is what it is, and they won in the end that season. So, and thank God as well, because the Bengals would have done it if they didn't.
Just a final point on Tomlin, and I kind of alluded to it, the wide receivers, but also you mentioned a running back as well. I mean, Bell and Brown, Smith-Schuster, Claypool, Deontay Johnson, all players who had their careers basically fall to pieces after they left. I mean, that says everything you need to know, because there was basically no drama while they were in the room, and then as soon as they left, they seemed to just melt.
And I think that's what I'm talking about when I express concern about people being so quick to want to get rid of a Tomlin. Is, it's so easy to say, like, oh, Tomlin kept the lid on these guys. It's not that simple. I'm not suggesting that Tomlin was parked outside in a Honda Corolla outside AB's house just waiting for him to do something stupid. But what he does do is create this really great, like, motivating environment. Clearly, the players love him. You only need to... I remember, like, back at that time, Le'Veon Bell used to, like, post videos on Twitter with him hanging out with Mike Tomlin, joking about with him in the cafeteria and stuff. There was a good vibe around that team. And I think that's so important. And when people talk about getting rid of a guy like Tomlin, and, well, we need new ideas, shift it all out, I worry all of a sudden you might fall into becoming a Washington, a New York Giants, a Jets.
I was going to pick the Jets. Actually, they were the team. Yeah. So when we were talking about a team that always has a winning year, I was going to mention the Jets. One winning season since 2010, hasn't won their division since 2001. Like, you can just be bad for a long time and not fix anything because you don't draft very well. And we know that all too well. Just had a couple of questions in the chat, and then we're going to need to let you go to crack on with our training camp review. But Brent DeWitt has some older, references, I think, to some players. He says, how does he compare LC Greenwood to Hutch? I see the same moves from both. Do you know LC Greenwood?
Yeah, I'll stop myself from speaking too much on LC Greenwood compared to Aiden Hutch. I love the question. I mean, great insight into a guy who should be a Hall of Famer in LC Greenwood. LC Greenwood, Rich speaks a lot. Rich, who is a guy, he was in the stadium. He does the podcast with us when he can. He was in the stadium for the Immaculate Reception. So that gives you an idea how long he's been watching the Steelers. He always talks about LC Greenwood as being the guy on the Steel Curtain defense who the only reason he's not in the Hall of Fame is because the rest of those guys are kind of all in the Hall of Fame. And so, he just thinks it's down to that. And he that's one of his kind of things that he stands on, is that LC Greenwood should be in the Hall of Fame. And that's a common sentiment in Pittsburgh. So I'll leave it at that. I won't compare him to Aiden Hutchinson because I never watched the guy play. So, yeah.
And then Lost Oceans had a question, which was, what are your thoughts on Kenny Pickett last year? Do you think he should have stayed in the room?
Yeah, Kenny Pickett, man. I think we all kind of sold ourselves a bit of a bill of goods on Kenny Pickett this time last year. I said on a show I did recently. I think back to that the year before last with the Raiders game. It was that Memorial game, and he came back on a great fourth quarter drive, threw an outside touchdown outside the numbers to Najee Harris and won that game. And it was this like moment that we all kind of felt like, wow, is that the Kenny Pickett moment? Have things changed? Because he looked all of a sudden like really accurate, and he was like throwing with great timing and anticipation, hitting really tight windows. And he was making a few mistakes here and there, but the interception numbers felt a little bit inflated to us because of some things that had happened earlier in the season. And we were starting to feel a little bit positive on Kenny going into last year. And the preseason was all great, and training camp whispers were great, and it, he picked up an injury, of course, unfortunately, in that season, and things just never recovered from there. And we saw how it went. He ended up kind of getting soft bench for Mason Rudolph because that's just kind of how things were going on that playoff run towards the end of the season. So I think that was the right decision. But I think all of that hurt Kenny's feelings, and I think what we learned was that Kenny Pickett did not have the thickest skin in the world. I don't want to be, there's no sour grapes here. I'm not coming for Kenny Pickett or anything, but I think it's pretty clear that when Russell Wilson came in, Kenny Pickett felt that he still should have been. Maybe, you talk about Daniel Jones still having chances 4 or 5 years in. He felt that he still should have been given a chance and had never really been given an opportunity with a real offense. And I think he's probably got an argument. Matt Canada's offense, we always argued was limiting maybe what Kenny Pickett could do. But hey, he's the one who thought it would be a better idea to go and compete against Jalen Hurts. All right. Whatever floats your boat, Ken.
Right, Simon, we're going to have to say goodbye
Yes,
to you, but
of
thank
course.
you so much for coming on and talking with us. Greatly appreciated, and hopefully we'll see you at some point during the season.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Always enjoy hanging out with you guys. Sorry I'm so verbose. Hope I've not made your podcast last too long.
No, love it, man. Thank you so
No,
much.
Our podcasts are never too long, so yeah. Cheers.
The longer the better. Yeah, no worries. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, Anthony. See you later.
Don't forget to follow the Twitter accounts for all of the guys that we've just featured. So you've got at Big Blue UK and Ireland. They are really funny on Twitter. You've got the Arrowheads Abroad, which Neil is a part of for Kansas City. They're really good value. And then Simon and the UK Steelers podcast are hilarious on Twitter. So if you want to have a good laugh, you got some British humour to go to boot with that, then do go and follow them there because they are good value. And pretty illuminating from all the guys. I forget how much I enjoy talking to people from other teams.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we don't really know that much about the other 31 teams, do we? Because, it's like when we berate people for talking about the Lions, they only see a few tweets online. They're like, yeah, we're experts about them. We're kind of the same outside of knowing a few of the players, and that we don't follow the ins and outs of the beat writers like we do, and we don't see all the information and that. So it is intriguing to listen to all the others and see what's going on there.
All right, let's get into our usual fare, shall we? I haven't done any preamble, but at this point we're past the post. And why don't you just talk about the college football show? Because I screwed up the YouTube, and I'm sorry, man. But you guys talked about some really good stuff last week.
No, it's fine. Yeah, we talked. So the media have done their preseason predictions for the leagues. They do preseason media polls. Like they're kind of pointless, but they're content and fun to talk about. To tell you who they reckon's going to win all the conferences. So we looked through those, and then we did what we call our all-stars this season. Like everyone does a watch list for players for the season. So me and Ryan, we get a load of players that we like. We tell you about them, and hopefully you follow their season through college and enjoy them. Like especially Ryan has a load of FCS guys and guys that literally nobody's ever heard of before. So it's very illuminating for players to watch going forward. And we did all right last year. So you get to hear about some of these guys before they come to national prominence. So we did that. And then this week we're going to be finishing off our Sunbelt preview. So we've got Sunbelt West, I think this week.
I think
I can't remember. Yeah, and then when I've done the show, I've got a load of guests to line up as well. We're going to be doing a lot of shows before the season starts. It'll be more than one a week, so because we're trying to cram in as much as we can before the season goes live. There's
Which
so
is
much to go
3
through.
weeks away now.
It's like 20 days away. So we'll be doing shows on weekends and during the week, and just literally there's that much. It's impossible to do 134 teams and all their stuff. So we'll just do what we can and then go through the season with it. But it's all fun.
All right, let's crack on with the news, and then we're going to go through training camp notes before gleaning through the press conferences of the last 7 days. So, looking at the news, we talked about Taylor Decker's contract extension last week, but a little tidbit that kind of went unnoticed by some is that Brad Holmes, while talking about Decker's extension, and said about Aleem McNeil, it's about time that he was extended. Nothing yet, but it sounds like they're very much working on it.
Yeah, he's the next guy in line. It'll happen, whether it's sooner or later. I mean, like it's better to just deal one at a time rather than do a ton at once. I guess you've got to do one contract, get that done, because then that'll make your future window for money clearer, and you know what you've got to spend and how to structure the next contract, etc. It's just sensible business. And once the Liam's done and the season's underway, if Barnes and Iffy are playing well, I've no doubt those contracts will start to get done as well, and slowly but surely we'll lock everyone up for the future. But the fact is, we've got a lot of the main pieces in now, and we don't have to worry about that. We've got no holdouts. We've got no contract drama in training camp, anything like that. Everything's hunky-dory from that point of view. So, yeah, we pay our players, not unlike the Dallas Cowboys who don't pay their players, and look what happens to them. Toxic culture, toxic team, F them Cowboys, they just, good teams treat their players well, and they're not a good team. I'm glad that our team treats our players well.
It's the reason why they win 12 games every year and fall apart in the playoffs is because they aren't built grit-wise. They are just not a team that fight for each other.
No, they're built to they get paid and then screw their teammates.
All right, moving on to other news. We've got a spate of injuries, which is not ideal. Not long after we actually finished recording last week, John Kaminsky, the defensive end, has a torn MCL. He's going to be out for an estimated 5 to 6 months. He might be back for a playoff run, although, Anne, correct me if I'm wrong, but generally speaking, when players come off major injuries, they're not exactly themselves when they come back. Colour me slightly incredulous that we're even thinking about that as a possibility.
Yeah, I think this is more a hopeful thing than anything else. I mean, he's not exactly been in the best of form either. Like, he is a year removed from his best form, and now he's going to miss pretty much all this season. And then, if you're playing a wild card game at home, big atmosphere, you need your best player. You don't exactly want to throw him in there and give him an important role. And again, the playoffs get harder and harder, and you find it hard. Where will he get his reps in that season? Unless we're blowing somebody out and we have the luxury of spending a whole half playing the second team, which just doesn't really happen in playoff games. You're just not going to be able to get him the game time to get him back up to speed again. So I feel it's more a hopeful thing than anything. But, as Campbell said, the important thing here, like, Kaminsky will work his ass off to get back. Like, he is worth doing this to, because if any guy will get back for it, he will. And you've got no issues on the mentality at all. So, you're hoping you're not having to use too many of these season IRs where you can bring them back types. You hope everyone's healthy. So hopefully you won't have two guys now who go down who you prefer to use more than this. He is well worth one of these spots, and just see what happens when the time comes, because he played in a club. He's done a lot for this team. It's just so sad, especially with so many unknowns at edge this year. Like, someone needs to put their foot down there, and this is one less option for that to happen now, which is not good. But
yeah, he deserves a ring with his team for what he's done at our worst, to be honest. Also with a bad injury and now on injured reserve is the Gardner Tane Mooti. By all accounts, he's been our best backup interior lineman, full stop, bar none. But he is done for the season with a shoulder injury that will require surgery. And sad for a guy who was out on the outside looking in, but really played himself into the sort of argument for being the sixth man.
And especially in light of today's news at camp, it's even more heady. Because, we've talked about this en masse. We have a great starting five, but we have precious little NFL starting experience behind that. We're taking rookies, man. We're taking day 3 picks. We're taking guys who, for want of a better word, are untested. So having a few guys in there, the likes of Mooti and Awashika, etc., who are going to provide NFL level caliber backup to this team, are like gold dust. Like, those are the guys we want in there in case, we need to plug them in for a game or two while someone recovers from a knock, or we rest guys up for the playoffs, etc. And now he's gone. That's one less option we have in the room. Because, of course, Awashika's missed a bit of time with injury as well. Now you are really, really skirting the depths, looking for any sort of experience whatsoever. This is going to be chucking a load of guys in there for the first time. So it's difficult. Absolutely. I guess, and it always sounds terrible saying this, but if you are going to lose people for the season, if it's not a starter, then it's a win. And that's terrible in itself, but because you've seen you've seen starters on other teams who are going down, who are gone for the season. At least the starting five are intact. for the most part.
Well, you
which
say
is the
that,
thing.
yeah. We'll
I
come on to
say
that in a
that, I'm
sec.
not sure, but losing Mooty's big, like I say, because we have such little NFL experience depth in that room. He would have been one of the guys you'd have been taking based on that alone. Right now, that now puts a lot of emphasis onto the guys who haven't played much NFL football. And in a season where you're going for the Super Bowl, that's big.
Yeah, I'll talk about what we might do with something in a minute, but a spate of injuries happened by the look of it in the first day of training camp with the joint practices with the Giants. So Terrion Arnold has a suspected concussion after a huge hit by Andrew Thomas, who was wearing a helmet as opposed to the Guardian helmets that you're meant to wear. According to Jeremy Reisman, the helmet tested better than the Guardian helmet for safety, and you're allowed to wear those in place of the Guardian helmets if they are deemed safer. So apparently it was allowed, but it looks a bit weird. Amazing that Terrion took the hit. I mean, the guy is almost double his weight, and he really lent into it. So fair play to him for having the grit to stand up to it, but a bit sad that he might be a little shaken up after that. Kevin Zeitler, the guards, the prized free agent signing the right guard, lasted one play before having a shoulder injury and did not return. That's the worrying thing that we were talking about. Sam Laporta didn't practice today. We don't know why. It's not expected to be a long-term issue, but it is slightly frustrating that he'd be getting some really good reps and he's not out there. And then Jack Campbell also at the end of practice had a bloodied hand. Apparently his entire hand was completely red with his own blood, and he shook it off saying, "'Tis but a scratch." If I can borrow the Monty Python and the Holy Grail line. But I don't entirely believe him. Worth mentioning here with Zeitler that if there is something there to be worried about, the Lions are second in NFL cap space with almost $43 million. That is including $29.4 million being dead and $1.7 million being on injured reserve. So they're missing $32 million in dead money and injured reserve, and there's still almost 43 left to spend. I'm not saying there's a lot of people to spend it on, but we've made a lot of signings and it's created this room.
Yeah, and this is why everyone's worried about all these deals we're handing out. But the fact is, Brad is paying his own guys, and the luxury with that is we didn't literally pay anyone in his first 2 years here because none of them are his draft picks, and we didn't need to. We sorted the cap situation out. When you look at the actual amount of guys that are paid big here, it's not that many. So we're in a very healthy situation, and to have this much cap in a year where we're going for a Super Bowl, I fully expect that to be left for the trade deadline. That's why it's there. If we need to go out and get a rental, like an edge maybe to go, or wide receiver if we have an issue there to the end of the year, if we need to pay someone 18, 19, 20 million, even for a part of the season, etc., we can go do that. And then we can let them go again. So Brad's been really good with his cap. We should not worry about the money that's getting spent at the minute because there's not much excess money out there. Not like the Patricia years when everything was dead money. There were guys on bloated contracts. Yeah, we got 32 million dead this year, but we've kind of had to eat some due to injuries, etc. We're just very healthy money wise. And that's why we're set to go again next year. And that's why we're set to keep going. Even with all these big guys coming up, we can afford to pay them all, which is great. And if we carry on drafting the way we are, we don't need to pay money on stupid free agents to come in and do it all. But having that war chest will be big. And because it gives us flexibility to go for this year. Because this is a Super Bowl window. We can't just nonchalantly go, oh, well, we can kind of wait this year. We can just keep going. There is a time where you have to make that final push. And we've got the leverage now to make that final push if we need to get there without jeopardizing the financial security of the future. Wonderful place to be in.
Wow.
And then a couple of signings just to briefly mention, although my own personal opinion is this is camp body territory and I don't see it moving the needle particularly, but we've signed the offensive lineman Jake Burton. He was formerly of the UFL team, the Michigan Panthers, as their left guard, and before that was part of the USFL team, the Philadelphia Stars, where he played at right guard, right tackle, and left guard. So it looks like he is a four-position offensive lineman, and we've brought back a player, the defensive lineman Pat O'Connor, who was the 2017 Lions 7th round pick, who didn't make the 53, but has played as a special teams stalwart for Tampa Bay ever since. And any thoughts on those?
What the hell's a stalwart? You mean a stalwart? You know the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he sat there in the chair point going, "That's me." That's Bob Quinn going, "That's my draft pick," and he's back there. I made a good draft pick. Like that's all I have to say about that. He's a Bob Quinn draft pick and he's back. No, I'm saying with you. Neither of these guys are going to see the roster. Offensive linemen, of course, are going to keep coming in because our depth is not decided yet. Like we're having trouble with Mahogany, which is not good. And like even the guys we drafted, Sorsdal and that, this is not guaranteed stuff yet. So in MO, as many offensive linemen as possible need to come through the building at the minute, and we need to look at every option when it comes to establishing our depth. So, giving another home guy a chance. I would prefer they bring in Breland Speaks if they're going for Michigan guys, because we need edge rushers and we need guys who've got NFL experience as well. He has both, so I'm still hoping that move happens. I would expect to see Breland here at some point, especially with Commish injured now. But yeah, camp, we see tons of guys come and go, and that's the reason why they're looking at them, seeing if there's anything there.
All right, moving on to training camp. We have got 5 days to cover. We did talk press conferences on July 29 with Dan Campbell, but we do actually have the day to cover because all of the media reports weren't out for that. So a little while ago now, a week ago exactly, and it was the first day of pads. Ragnow had a really good day, beating Martin and Smith. Decker and Davenport had a draw, more on Davenport later. McNeil had a great day against Zeitler. Apparently that was a really good battle that McNeil had the better of. Hutch and Sewell managed to draw, but Hutch beat Sorsdal, which is not a surprise. But apparently Colby is looking much, much better with his footwork and hand placement. I should mention, this is a gleaming of all of the reports which are done by Pride of Detroit and Lions Wire respectively, our friends on both of those publications. We're only giving a very small amount of what's in those articles. Do go and actually read them for yourselves. Well done to Eric and Jeremy and Jeff as well. Really good content. The rest of this day, Mooti, God damn it, I'm going to say God rest his soul because he's not dead, but he's dead to us for the moment. Looked great in run and pass block. He outshone Coyote Awashika, so that's why we're talking about him as maybe the sixth man there. Pascal's hitting the twos now, apparently, with Davenport and Levi taking his place. More on Levi later as well. Jefferson, the new linebacker we signed that we talked about last week, he made some plays on special teams. CJ Moore hasn't had a rep on defense yet, and I think that's actually continued all the way through till now. CJ Moore hasn't had a rep on defense, which is borderline worrying for him and his prospects. Robertson and Mosley are seeing reps at outside corner, so they're not just having a look in the nickel. Gilmore and Norris repping with the twos. They've been playing so well that they're getting up in that rotation. Worth mentioning, Norris is this year's kind of primary corner UDFA. Defense had a great day in 11 on 11s with Davis and Kirby getting PBUs. Gilmore got a pick in 7 on 7s, and we were going through tackling drills. Going to the next day, real big emphasis on tackling. Here's a tackling the previous day that I've just mentioned. Tackling again today, looking at proper form. I think the hip drop tackle is something that they're clearly trying to make sure doesn't happen. We're not giving away some cheap yards just because. Iffy had one of his rare good days in this camp so far, so had a good day in coverage, getting a PBU in situational drills. Although, by the look of it, across the spectrum so far, Iffy's actually had a poor camp, especially in coverage, which is not particularly great for my boy. Parker Hesse made 2 great catches and a lovely seal block. We'll talk about him when it comes to press conferences, but it looks like he's really come into his own with the pads coming on. Davenport, apparently, he looked like the best player on the field on July 30, which is absolutely incredible to hear. I mean, come on to it in a minute, but I know that we were all a bit worried that he hadn't, got over his injury yet. So the fact that he's getting up to speed so quickly is really encouraging to hear. Barnes at the Sam getting an interception and a sack is fantastic. And then Doris Fountain with 2 nice low catches in traffic, and I think he also had a really good block in there too. Caden Davis, the UDFA no, not UDFA, he's got some experience, but the free agent wide receiver we've got in his depth with a lovely 25-yard touchdown. James Mitchell made a horrific gaffe apparently in run blocking, just completely missing his assignment. Ended up with Josh Pascal almost taking a handoff in the backfield. And then Rakestraw got an INT, Levi got a TFL and a sack, Campbell got a TFL, McNeil got a sack, Craig Reynolds got some really nice running back blocks against Rodrigo and Robertson and had some good special teams work as well. And I'll stop there and then do the next 3 days. But lots going on there in camp and movement happening in the depth chart that you can see, none more so than perhaps Doris Fountain and someone that we have all kind of written off at defensive tackle, but Levi seems to be rocketing up the board.
Yeah, I think the overall thing I take away from it is just it's extremely competitive all across the board. You can tell when you've got a Super Bowl caliber team ready that like every position on the field, there's an intense battle going on. Like when this first started, generally it was the offense that was always better or would come better in the end because there was just such a gulf in talent between the two. And now you look at the offensive line and the defensive line, they're trading blows, they're trading wins. It's insanely competitive. You know, you've got guys in the secondary who for the first 4 days of camp didn't have a single interception at all. There was just nothing to show for it. The offense was just running them ragged. And then in week 2, you've seen, you know, the comeback. You've seen them posting interception after interception, pass blocks, making it difficult. Like all across the board, it just feels like they're all getting better. And the fact that they sort of go to and fro means one team's learning, the other's adapting, and then vice versa, the other's learning, the other's adapting, etc. And it just makes you really confident going forward that this team is in a really healthy position. And that when it comes to them all as one unit coming and kicking other teams' asses, they're going to be right there for the depth chart stuff again. You know, we fundamentally disagree on this. I don't care. It means nothing who's repping where. The only thing that matters is when you take that field for the preseason games, because the starters, there are very few starting positions, if any at all, under question here. I mean, maybe you're looking at the nickel and safety and bits in the secondary where all the guys are new. But apart from that, you could pretty much name every single starter on this team.
X wide receivers maybe the only other one.
Yeah, it feels like Raymond is getting the glows from there, like as the third guy. Like, I love having outside X wide receivers, but this team was the third best offense in the NFL last year. It's not exactly missing one. It's good without one. It's not like it's something that was holding us back. It didn't cost us in the NFC Championship game that we didn't have an outside wide receiver. And they're my favorite type of receivers. They're the kind of guys I love to watch in the draft and the kind of guy I love to advocate drafting, but it's not a problem for this team. We have just lost Josh Reynolds from last year. We were the third best team in the NFL when it came to offense. We'll be just fine. But, you know, I don't care about depth charts. I care about what you do in the preseason game. Can Doris Fountain go out there and make catches in a real game situation? You know, can Levi go out there and make plays against an opposition offensive line who he's not going up against every single day? Can these guys carry their form on into situations against other teams? Because us, more than any, should realize like the amount of camp warriors we've seen over the years who just have not translated into anything else is huge. There's a massive difference between doing this in camp and doing this against opposition as part of our 53. So right now, I don't really care where any of them are. When we hit the field against the Giants on Thursday, that's when I'll start to care about what they do and who's where, etc. And when the official charts start to come out, that will give some indication as to what the team is thinking about them. So
they're out. Official depth chart is out. Well,
Jeremy said they were unofficial. No, they're unofficial. They are not. They're not official.
They're the internal media guys, aren't they?
It's They're not team depth charts at the moment. They come out after preseason games when you start getting those. So All I will say, though, the level of competitiveness is highly encouraging. This feels like the most complete competitive camp we've had in a long time. There's not an obvious imbalance of power. Like all units are fighting against one another, and everybody seems to be getting better because of the opposition they're facing. And that's what a Super Bowl team should be.
Let's just cover the last 3 days. I do agree with you in most part, but we'd be remiss to not at least mention what's happening, I think, because it
Oh no, you can talk about what's happening. I just don't care about the end depth chart bit of
Yeah,
it. Like,
that's
what happens is happens. These guys have got to put themselves in a position to get an opportunity. Like Fountain should be the first guy they throw to against the Giants because of what he's done. If the opportunity is there, like that's his right, and he's earned that. But he needs to go out and do it, and hopefully he can.
Right, last 3 days, day 7, July 31, it was a walkthrough, so nothing serious happening, but worth just mentioning who was repping where. I know what Ant just said, but bear with me. So Taylor Decker stood out of this one. Penny Sewell moved over to left tackle. Dan Skipper was with the ones at right tackle. Colby Sawster was the right tackle with the twos. Then when you had Sewell coming out of the game, you had Connor Galvin and Giovanni Manu rotating at left tackle. Apparently Connor Galvin is looking pretty tidy at tackle. And in fact, I mean, listen to anyone talk about Manu. They're saying he's not even ready to be the fourth guy in that position. So it could be that Galvin is a guy that hits the practice squad and maybe gets called up if you have problems in that position where you can't move Sewell over or something like that. I don't know, but let's see. Anyway, Zylstra ahead of Mitchell at tight end. Craig Reynolds ahead of Sione Vaki at running back. Branch and Kirby starting with the ones at safety. Ifeatu Melifonwu with the twos, which, given what I just said earlier, isn't really a surprise with Melifonwu. Then moving on to day 8, August the 1st. Dan Campbell, for the first time this training camp, was so unhappy with the execution that he was seeing that he actually stopped practice and lashed out at the team for poor execution. Jake Bates' struggles continue. Didn't mention it in the previous day's roundup, but Bates has had a really questionable set of days after a really encouraging start. He seems to be stacking some worse days, so that's not great. There is big talk amongst the press corps that we really need to get in another body just to kind of push him a little bit. But it wasn't just the field goals he was missing, but also with the kickoffs, he was missing the landing zone short, apparently, trying to hit it perfectly, so his touch just isn't quite there. Good days were had from Iffy, Barnes, Kirby, McKeown, Lynn, and Jermar Jefferson versus the ones in pass pro and in running plays. Levi, bad days by Jake Funk, Shane Zylstra, and then you had Rakestraw repping with the ones for some snaps for the first time, and at nickel with the threes, which is the first time we've seen him repping at nickel at all in this camp. And then you had Doris Fountain repping with the ones entirely at the X wide receiver position, followed by Antoine Green and Donovan Peoples-Jones rotating. Moving into, not yesterday, day 9, August 2nd's day, we had first team defensive line continuing to excel. Aleem, Hutchinson and Levi in particular having cracking days, apparently. Fountain had a nice touchdown down the seam. Jefferson had a really long touchdown run after bad angles taken at safety by both Branch and Ifeatu Melifonwu. Hooker threw 3 interceptions on this day. One was a pick 6. Apparently, it's all the same stuff that we've seen before from Hooker, making the same mistakes which he's been coached on before, and he's not learning from them, which is worrying to hear. But he also had some really great tight window throws and some good timing throws as well. So it's been very up and down for him. Again, bad days for Manu and for Jake Bates, but a really good special teams day for Kindle Vildor. And then just briefly today, we don't have the media reports out yet, I don't think, but just what we've seen from the camp, it seems like it was a very up and down day for the Lions. Lots of injuries, lots of fights. It looks like our defense struggled on the back end with the DBs suffering a little bit versus Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors and a few other bits and pieces. But you also heard that we had a great day on offense, especially the offensive line doing well against that fearsome defensive line of the New York Giants, and otherwise Jared Goff absolutely tearing it up as we would expect. And it's been really interesting to hear some of this. But Out of nowhere, Jermar Jefferson seems to be getting the love which we've been hoping for the past 4 off seasons.
Yeah, I love this. Like, I love Jamar Jefferson, and I fully believe that he's capable of succeeding here. And the fact that a round 7 pick is still here 4 years later, like, the team sees something about him. Juice Staley saw something in him when he was here. He said he was one of his favorite running backs here, and like in terms of his attitude and that, he was getting it right. And I think now, like, in the face of extreme adversity, given we've got the top 2 tier running backs here, and then you've just drafted Varkey, you've got Reynolds, you've got Zonovan Knight, who's played in the NFL. Seems to be one of those things that he's just right. Well, I'm going to go out, show you all what I've got, and you leave me out at your peril because I can do this here. And I know I've wavered maybe a little in my belief there, but for the most part, I did his tape. I watched him play in college. I know that this is a guy who can go and do it at this level. And he's improved where he's needed to improve. As a third down running back, you've got to be good at your pass protection. You've got to be able to come in and take the handoffs if you can. And he's showing that he can. So it's great to see him, because that's going to push everybody else. Like, Reynolds and Varkey can't get comfy knowing that Zonovan Knight and Jamar Jefferson are behind him, but that's just great for your depth room. Just going to create intense competition going forward. In terms of some of the other guys, so the Bates stuff, now, not wanting to be, the negative Nancy here type, but I was never as enamored with Bates as everybody else was. Everybody else loves the big leg, but what I always say about kickers, you can have the leg, but you need the stones. And by that, Jake Bates kicks in front of, crowds that rival the numbers of a decent sized stag party in an empty stadium in what is essentially, I'm not trying to offend the UFL, but it's meaningless football. Obviously, you can win the UFL championship and that, but really, no one cares if you win that. There's no pressure on you whatsoever. You can just go out there, bang 60-yarders like it's training, and it's fine. If you're playing week 1 against the LA Rams, you are in a stadium full of 60,000 people. It is 21-20 to the Rams, and time is about to expire, and you've got time to hit a kick from 48 yards, and it is the game winner potentially there. Do you have the nads to go out there and hit that kick? It doesn't matter if you've got the leg. It really doesn't. You've got to have the stones to be able to go out there and do it. And this is the problem with having Jake Bates on this team. The only way you can discover whether he has the ball sack to go out there and do this is to actually put him out there in a situation and see if he can do it. No amount of training, no amount of just wheeling him out in practice is going to show you whether he's an NFL standard kicker. But the fact is, he's never kicked in the NFL. He's never kicked under this pressure before. And we are a Super Bowl candidate team who needs someone who is clutch at the kicker position. That's what we've been begging for. I'd rather take the guy who's got the stones, who can't hit from over 50, than the guy who can hit from over 50, has got the leg, but doesn't have the brain to go out there and keep his emotions separate and miss when it really matters. So it's a big problem that he's going out there in camp and missing them from short. Like, he's missed a lot within 50, within 45 even. And that's the pressure. Now that Badgley's injured and he's out for the season, as it stands, that spot is his to lose. And are we starting to see the pressure of him going, oh my God, this spot actually might be mine. I'm going to be kicking in the end. Oh my God, I'm going to be kicking in front of 60,000, 80,000, however many fans, wherever I'm at. These guys want to go to a Super Bowl. Can I go out there and kick one from 60 and get them over the line? And you're starting to see the nerves now. So I agree. We need to bring in lots more kickers. We need to push him. We need to test him as much mentally as possible without putting him in a game situation to see whether he cracks beforehand. Because if we can find that out sooner rather than later, then we need to. So with Bates, it's concerning, but it's not unexpected. I think just people hyped him up way too much coming in, thinking he was just going to come in, bang him in from 60 yards every week in the NFL. There are very few guys in NFL history who can do that. Very few. That's why Justin Tuckers are generational, because they just don't come along. So there's questions there. In terms of others, I mean, you've highlighted a lot of guys who are doing well. Levi stacking good days time after time. Jamar Jefferson's stacking good days. Manu's struggling, which we can't expect. Hooker is struggling, but weirdly enough, for a guy who I don't like the Hooker draft pick, I think it's a waste. I don't think he's going to be all that. He's never going to challenge as a starter. I don't care that he's playing badly in camp. Not that I don't care, but you are seeing, the transition from scheme. A lot of the mistakes he's making, locking onto first reads, holding onto it a bit too long, because he comes from a spread option offense, which gave him this stuff on a plate. His first read would be free because that offense is designed to get wide receivers open very quick and get the ball out your hand very quick. That doesn't happen in the NFL. And what you are seeing is problems associated with that. He's having to hold on a little longer because his first read's not there. He doesn't know what to do when he's looking past his first read. He doesn't know how to improvise. He's freezing. He's making mistakes. He's taking sacks. He's throwing bad passes. That is the natural transition from going from a spread offense to an NFL offense. So I don't care. Even as someone who doesn't like the pick, I don't care. I'm not going to knock him for that. This is what happens. And you can see enough good throws from him that you see what they see in him. There is a good quarterback in there somewhere. There is an NFL backup level quarterback in there somewhere. You've just got to work out all those. You've got to go with the punches here. Preseason is going to be so invaluable for him to go out and do this. I'd just play him pretty much all 3 preseason games for as long as possible, give him as many reps as possible there. But I don't care that he's doing bad. It's a little bit concerning, but this is his first real game time. It's his first real off season. He's changing the offense. No matter how much learning does not get you accustomed to making that change, you've got to go out on the field and do it, and you'll see naturally that there. Outside of that, like I say, it's been good. It's been competitive. The defense especially had a really good second week after kind of getting their ass handed to them a little bit in the first week, and that's what you want. So overall, I think camp from those points of view, those 2 weeks has been really good for us.
Grandizer just had a question, which is, what is it about recent times that the Lions have struggled to find a kicker through draft or UDFA and developed into a consistent kicker? And frankly, I think the answer is it's not been a priority. And because drafting kickers tends to go so badly, you tend to get one through free agency because another team cuts them and the light switches on for them. I mean, frankly, we lucked into Prater. It was just a free agency acquisition that we just took on and paid maybe slightly too much to get what we did, but he was absolutely fantastic for us. Otherwise, how well has drafting players ever done at kicker? Not very.
I just we were talking about in the chat the other day, Hansen had the luxury of having a lot of bad years when he started his career, but he wasn't on a team that was fighting to get to the Super Bowl, quite frankly. It wasn't good teams. We could afford to have a bad kicker for years while he got his eye in and got the mental part of his game up. Unfortunately, we're in a position now where we can't draft a guy and just ride 3 or 4 bad years of him and hope he's going to become good. It's a tough game, really. I think kicker's probably one of the few positions where you prefer them to go out the league for a few years. Just kick in the UFL, kick in the spring leagues, kick in the CFL, whatever. Just get lots of experience behind them and then bring them up. Because I think so few kickers just translate right away from college to the NFL. It's just a different level of pressure. And it's not a gap that's easily manageable. Like, you think as a linebacker or a corner or whatever, like, not every game could it come down to you like one play. Like a kicker could sit on the sideline of a game for 58 minutes and not be needed to kick a field goal, and then he's expected to just come in and kick a winner, and it's do or die. That's it. He gets one chance. He doesn't get a do-over. He doesn't get a second down, a third down where he bucks up and he gets another chance. He's just got to come in and make a play when his leg might be cold. It's a different level of mentality for kicker, and I think it's much harder to evaluate because like I said, the elite kickers we think around this league. There's not many elite kickers inside 40 and then outside as well, because it's just a mentality. It's just so few guys have that level of mentality where they can keep themselves cold and just come in and smack a winner from 55. It's a transcendent type of pressure. I just don't think there's that many of those guys around. I don't know whether you agree or not, but
No,
for me,
yeah,
it
absolutely.
is.
Yeah. Total agreement. Let's crack on through some of these press conferences because there are some good tidbits in here, but I'm not going to dwell too long. So July 29, we did Dan Campbell's last week because that had already happened, but I hadn't managed to process the players. We had Frank Ragnow up. He said the intensity's gone up with the pads on. He said missing practices in previous years has been frustrating with him just trying to manage his injury. The fact that he managed to get consecutive practices under his belt and feeling like he's one of the guys grinding again in training camp has been great. He said Broderick's been getting better with every rep. And Levi said dealing with his injury in life is no joke. So for him to come back and play football like he is, he's twitchy, explosive, I'm really pleased for that guy. That was all the way back 7 days ago. So bear that in mind. Liam McNeil said you only get better from here. The offensive line are a great group of guys, the best in the league, so it's great to work against them. Iron sharpens iron. He said with Coach Williams, we're progressing so much as a line, it's been great. The way that with DJ Reader, the way that he's aggressive, takes on blocks, everything, it's stuff that he's trying to get better at. So being coached even while Reader isn't been playing is really interesting. He said on the contract, he told his agent, don't talk to me about it. I'm just getting my head down and whatever happens, happens. On Levi, said he looks like he feels a lot better in himself. And then about Marcus Davenport, he said he's a silent killer. He just runs through people's faces, which I thought was an interesting turn of phrase. And then Jameson Williams, what is notable about JMO is his smile. Like, he always had a little bit of a smile on in the last couple of years, but sometimes it just looked pained. He was utterly beaming at the podium. It was so good to see how happy he looked. He said he does feel more comfortable. He comes with being out there and knowing what he's doing. He says hearing the fans chant his name makes him feel awesome. The opportunities come with hard work. He can't change whether he gets thrown the ball or not, but if he executes in practice, the trust will come. And he said he expects to be the best player in his position of all time, and he's got a long way to go to get there. And he said, with no injury, no suspension, just camp, with focus, what we're going to run, the looks, what we do, that he's got no worries and he's just having a lot more fun. And Aleem, JMO, Frank, some players that you just absolutely love right now, right?
Like, I have never been more certain in my conviction in my life that a player is going to absolutely destroy the NFL like JMO is this year. Like with most players, I like to stay, realistic. Like, they're gonna have their ups, they're gonna have their downs. Nothing's ever a sure thing, etc. But with JMO, there's just this. I have this unwavering level of belief in him. Like he cannot fail. He is not going to fail, and this is going to be, we are going to see something truly special. I tweeted it out at some point. They're going to make a movie about what he does this year from where he's at because he's going to be that good. And why am I so confident? Like, I've seen it from him. Like, all the stats nerds will pile in on his stats. Oh, he doesn't have flashy stats. Oh, he's a bust, etc., etc. I've watched him play every single game of his career, and I see a young man who's had to undergo a lot of just scrutiny, but a lot more unjust scrutiny. Some might say a witch hunt against him and his character and what he is to this team, and he's always remained true to himself and the player he is, and he works incredibly hard for this team. He is selfless. He puts everyone before him. If he needs to go make a block, he go makes a block. He is not too big for anything. There is no job too small for him. That is exemplary of his attitude. And, it kind of winds me up, people saying that his attitude's different this year, he's better this year. No, it's not. His attitude for me has always been spot. He's just been in a tough situation. But the attitude's always been there. The work ethic has always been there. I think what we're seeing now is he believes in himself after year two. Again, maybe it didn't translate to the stat sheets, but he made a lot of big plays for us last year. He was a reason that we were as good as we were last year because he goes in, puts his head down, makes plays, even if it's not even if it's not for his own personal stats. And now that Reynolds is gone, there is now an opposition. There is an opportunity for him to go up high in the receiver ranks, for him to go and become the star that we drafted him to be. And I feel like he's on his redemption arc now, where he's about to reach the top and he's about to go full Super Saiyan on us all. I have zero doubt that JMO is going to absolutely destroy everything in his path this year, and rightfully so, as long as the team get it right. And I will say this till I'm blue in the face. This is as much on the team as it is JMO. Screw anyone who says it's JMO who's got to earn something from this team. They both need to meet in the middle here, because they've let him down just as much as some might say he's let the team down. But if they find that balance, he will be one of the best guys in football this year. So I'm looking forward to that. As for the others, we all love Frank, Aleem. You can see the effect of training against Ragnar. I mean, you saw that rep from Giants practice today where he just tossed the Giants centre around like he was a little cuddly toy. He was going back 6 or 7 yards every time he took a stride backwards because Aleem was just completely handling him. There's not going to be many guys who he's going to come up against that are as good as Frank, and he's just going to absolutely wreck them. So this goes back to the whole iron sharps iron thing. Like, I believe it when these D-line guys, the trench guys, say that they're making one another better. Clearly they are. So, yeah.
Moving on to July 30, Dan Campbell talking about Decker's extension after it was announced the previous day. He said, fired up to get that a pivotal piece of what we've done here since they arrived. Talking to Deckers at OTAs back in March about the contract, he said, we said to the team, we want them to talk to us if something's bothering them, so it's not a surprise. I appreciate him trusting us. So basically, Decker came and directly talked to the team and said, I'm concerned about this situation. I don't like it. And Dan went back to Decker and basically said, you're coming off an injury. Let's just see how that works out. And then I promise you we'll get this done. He said so, and he got it done once the injury checked out. So the transparency, not only to say to the team, do it, the trust shown in the team to go back to the leadership room and say, I've got a problem. The transparency from the coaching staff to say, if this happens, we'll do this. And then getting it done. The trust being built in the room and the transparency with the media and the public is something that I don't think is replicated anywhere else in the league. So really, really interesting to hear all of this. Very revealing. Talks about the hip drop tackle, said it's a point of emphasis. You have to work on your tackling. We talked about the fact that in 2 straight days they worked on tackling a lot. He said it's not a discipline you learn by doing other things. If you don't teach tackling, you don't learn tackling. So it's important because the defense does it for 70 plays on a Sunday, but there is a fine line to tread between learning that skill and risking injury, so you don't want to go over the top. About being there in pads, he said Parker Hesse really stood out in that. With Stephen Gilmore, he said he's got ability, but we need to see more from him. With Mahogany, he said we can't divulge the illness or the prognosis, but he said it's concerning because anytime a rookie misses even one day of practice, he's a long way behind. The fact that he's not been in it at all, he said, we just have to assume he's not here right now. He is virtually checked in, he is attending the meetings, but right now, he's not there. And that's basically the end of it. On the players on that day, Amit Robertson came in, bubbly, lovely personality, just kind of puts a smile on your face. So the competition's always fun. Some vets, some younger guys, they're working together really well. They're trying to make each other better. He said he's blessed to be here. It's a great opportunity. He said he's loving working under AG, that he's very detailed. and he's tailoring his advice to Amik. It's not the same for everyone. He knows who Amik is as a player, undersized corner, highly competitive, not unlike Aaron Glenn himself. But the advice he's giving to him is not necessarily the same advice he's giving Terry and Arnold, for example. So great to hear. And then he said, I'm a football player. Wherever I am, I just want to contribute and make it better, when he's talking about whether he's going to play in the slot or play outside. And then Marcus Davenport, for me, really interesting how shy and reserved and not forthcoming he was with anything beyond the question that he was asked. So very much a player who perhaps wants to let his football playing doing the talking, but he said he's just kicking some rust off, that the ankle hasn't stopped him going, so he's pretty good. Went short of saying that he's fully healthy again. He said, we've got a lot of football players that aren't appreciated enough, and it's a great competition across the board, and he's loved working with Coach T. And he says, the talk don't matter, we've still got to go and do the work. And on last year, he said it wasn't just a high ankle sprain, which is why he couldn't make it back. He also had a deltoid tear. No surprise when you're dealing with upper body and lower body injuries that you have the season he did last year. And Dan, very transparent with the process with Decker. And then some very contrasting interviews with those two players.
Well, yeah, you go back to the Dan stuff, and it's like the Cowboys stuff at the minute. How their players are not getting paid. How you hear there's no contact between them. There's nothing going on, and you feel like McCarthy has no real power there. Like the players, Dak's not going to go to McCarthy and go, "Look, will you help me get this done? You know, I've got issues. I'm not happy." You know, he's just very much a lame duck there. With Campbell, like you said, his players can come to him, can talk about these issues if they want to, because of course, I never, ever will put it against a player to go and get their money. Like, you earned your money, you go get it, son. Like, NFL teams screw players over all the time. So, you know, this kind of just all keeps going back to the culture Dan's created. And it makes it even more laughable that people are still trying to denigrate Dan as a coach, saying he's just a rah-rah guy, etc. I saw that the other day again. I'm just like, well, his senior players are going to him with issues of the highest level about contracts and stuff, and they know they are welcome in his office. He sits there, he chats it through with them, they're transparent with them. They've created, and it's not hyperbole, probably the best culture in the NFL as of now. I don't think you even look at someone like the Chiefs, who are multiple Super Bowl winners, and you see all the arrests and stuff there. Like, you know, they're good coaching, don't get me wrong, but in terms of a healthy culture, he's probably got one of the best going. So that these guys can go up to him and ask him about this, but still not let it affect the way they train. There's a mutual respect there, and that, as a fan, should make you really, really happy. Because, you know, there's going to be none of this holding out. There's going to be no drama. There's going to be no sideshow. There's been nothing really here in Dan's tenure that's distracted from the team on the field. So it's almost not surprising to hear little stories like this. But, you know, I just love him. You know, he never makes excuses for anything. Like, he's talking about the hip drop. He could just go, "Oh, this is lame. We're losing football. It's not pure anymore," etc. No, he just, whatever happens, he adapts to it. And he gets by. And I literally could listen to him talk all day long. I like how he gives his dues to the guys who are out there. He just doesn't give non-committal answers to who might or who might not be doing well. You know, he talks about Hesse, guys like that. Like, that must be big for them to hear the coach talking about them in a media meeting, saying how well they've done. Again, it's a reason for these guys to go out and perform. Like, their name will start getting circulated. People start talking about them. They'll give a legitimate chance to make the roster. So I love it. I love about the guys I'm hearing about. The Mahogany stuff is concerning. At this point, he is probably going to go to the practice squad. Because Dan's right. You can't afford to miss this much. Like, for a guy like Mahogany, he needs to play pretty much every snap of the 3 preseason games to get as much experience under his belt, get up to game fitness as close as he can, and then you take him on the 53 and you feel comfortable about it. The fact that he's not trained at all yet, and we're coming up to the week of the first preseason game, before we know it, it'll be over and we'll be cutting down to the final 53-man roster. It's going to be very difficult to justify taking him. And I love him to death. but I think he's going to end up on the practice squad now. That's just how it's going to be. I don't think anyone will poach him just yet, because if there are issues with injuries and that, I think he'll be perfectly safe. But obviously, I'd love to see him out there. So hopefully, it's nothing too serious for him. Very quickly, Lisa, Jake Bates is not a draft signing from us. I give 3 years to draft signings, not to free agents. Like, I'm not going to give Marcus Davenport 3 years to prove himself here. You got a year or you're out, buddy. For draft picks, I'll give you 3 years. For kickers, we can't afford to give Jake Bates 3 years. If he's 3 years of a bad kicker, we cannot afford that, because that's our Super Bowl window gone. So, as for the players, yeah, great, but they're newbies. I am tired of hearing things from newbies and not perform. I'm just at that point now. Guys like Davenport, guys like Robertson, you talk the talk, right? Well, go out on the field and show me, because we've had way too many guys come here, blow their own trumpet, and then sit on the bench doing call for their entire career. So, yeah.
Moving on to July 31, Dan Campbell again. So this was the walkthrough day. He said, we're going to ramp it down today before we go back up for the next 2 days before the joint practices. On Kaminsky, he said, it sucks for him. We feel really bad about it, but we're in a position to handle this, feel pretty good about our room and the young guys developing. Levi's healthy, Davenport with more reps. With Levi, said he's earned this. It's clear that he is one of the best defenders on the team. He plays with violence, he's stout and fundamentally better than he's ever been. His confidence is sky high, and Tyrell has done a great job. Has done a great job for that room. In terms of Kamish coming back, he said him and Brown have talked about getting the roster to work for them and hopefully getting him back later on. So it's expected that he's going to stay on the roster until cut downs, where he'll go on IR. Run game, he said one guy here or there has not been executing, which is why our run game hasn't really been getting it done quite yet. We now have heard, of course, that we've had some longer runs for a touchdown, including the Jermar Jefferson one we referenced earlier. He said we're challenging each other the right way back and forth. You want to know which group is testing each other, and I feel like we're doing that. With Betts, they said they're dialing it back for him. Obviously, he's got the pass rush now, but they tried it with Sam with him initially, after spring was so good for him, but it's not quite worked. He's playing a bit slower than they'd like, so they're taking it off his plate to try and see if he can get their confidence back. And I said on Betts and Houston, ultimately, it's about who's going in the game, and the more you can do, the more likely it is you're active on game day. They said one-trick ponies that are backups are hard to carry on the roster if you can only do one thing, which is a worry for both when they're dialing it back for Betts. But anyway, Hutchinson was the only player up on this day. Said this year feels different with the new coach and the additions in the D-line room. He says this is the best we've been in camp to this point in his third year. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of revitalized energy. On Levi, he said he's been unbelievable. He's a force of nature out there. Put the pads on and he's been great. It's going to be crucial for us to have him playing at a high level, because when he's pain-free, he's a force to be reckoned with, and I can't wait to see it on Sundays. In terms of bringing it down and then bring it back up again, like Dan did with the walkthrough day on this day, he said Dan's got a great monitor for when to do that, and it's really interesting to see how he works with it. He said in terms of breaking down film together, so with Davenport in the room, you're all seeing things a bit differently, so you're all learning from each other on that. And on Coach Williams, he said everything we do is about getting off the ball and striking blocks. It's a liberating mindset. It's not strict about block this way, block that way, but just going as hard as they possibly can. And that's it for that. So July 31. And Dan ramped it down. Kaminsky got injured, but a lot of smoke being blown up Levi's backside by both Dan and Hutch.
Yeah, and this is where, like, the Levi fan in me wants to go, yay, this is great. And then there's just a part of me going, right, let's see it. Let's see it in a game situation. And because this is very important. Because if you take Levi on your roster, you're probably kicking someone like Mekhi Wingo off it. Maybe, potentially. Or someone who, can give you something at the next level. And if he gets hurt, you potentially lost them for good. So, like, I am, what is the term? Cautiously optimistic. And, I never bet against Levi. I'm hoping that he comes in and he's all that's advertised and this carries on. It will be one of the greatest comeback stories of all time. Like, he comes in, plays a full season, he should be up for comeback player of the year.
I
Like,
was thinking that
without a
too.
shadow
Yeah.
of a doubt, Levi should be a comeback player of the year. Like, this is what the award was designed for. He has overcome probably the most serious medical condition a defensive lineman can have. A spine fusion is one, like, you could injure anything else, but your spine, when you're a guy who's having to deal with leverage and torque and pressure every single snap without fail, like, it's just almost impossible. Very few guys come back from this injury, so you're hoping that he does well with that. But at the same point, I know they're not blowing smoke up his arse without merit. Where there's smoke, there's fire with Dan. If he talks about you, he's talking about you for a reason. Like, he's been talking about, guys like Gilmore, etc., and he's been talking about Parker Hesse. That's earned. Dan doesn't give unearned praise. He doesn't pay lip service. So you've got to think there's something to it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you play Levi for a good amount of snaps in the first preseason game and then ramp him up to where he's playing the full lot at the end. Like, I would just send him all out there. You want to see if that back can hold up against the full game workload, because we're going to need him. DT depth is thin. We're going to need him to be able to come in there, especially DJ Reader is quite clearly at this point not going to be healthy for, maybe even the first couple of months of the season. He's not going to be healthy and doing his usual workload. So there's going to be a lot of snaps to be had there. And Broderick needs to work his way up. So Levi's going to need to put the effort in there. So more than anyone, this preseason is huge for him. As for other bits in there, like the stuff with Betts, that's not surprising. He's a CFL pass rusher. Like, again, and this is just thing I'm in there. Houston, I don't care if they're trying to make this a battle. Houston's so much better than he is. So much better at an NFL level. There's not even a competition at this point. And this will be one of the few areas I disagree with Dan. Like, you can have a one-trick pony as a starter. Like our Steelers friend was saying earlier, TJ Watt is a one-trick pony as a pass rusher.
But he was only saying as a backup, though.
I know, but it's like, he's only a one-trick pony, but as a starter, it seems weird that something that flies as a starter doesn't fly as a backup at the same point. Like, these guys, you want these guys to be pass rushing edge rushers, drop back linebackers, and you pay them what? You're getting them from the CFL, you're getting from round 7 of the draft, and you want them to be these all-round, all-conquering guys. Not these many guys exist in the NFL. Like, I think people don't realize this. Everyone goes, we seem to think that every other team has 2 perfect drop back edge rushers who are great in coverage. No, they don't. Like, most teams, they're specialist edge rushers. The good edge rushers are good against the run, which is what both of them have problems with. But you still take, at any level, starter, backup, special teams, you always take the guy who's better at pass rushing, because that's what he's there for primarily. He's there to rush the passer. He's there to make plays on the quarterback. You always take that guy first. And I'm sorry for the Betts stands out there, but he doesn't even come close to being as good as James Houston as an NFL level pass rusher. So it does not surprise me that slowly but surely Houston's going to eke him out, or they're going to make it seem like he has, but all along from start to finish, he will get that space on the roster, and rightly so. So there. That's what I think about it.
Fair. Right, August 1, our penultimate day that we're going to cover today. Ben Johnson at the podium instead of Dan Campbell this time, so I've actually gone into a bit more detail, and actually Ben gave a lot in this interview. But he started off referencing the rather large podium in front of him and said, poor AG, right? To basically a minute of the media falling over themselves laughing, which I thought was great. He said, we've been really aggressive with this install and we've made a million mistakes, but that's allowed us to sort the issues out. The coaches are teaching the concepts better than we ever have before because they've been in place for such a long time now. So we're in a great place. It's been a great first week and a half. Jared Goff, he said he's been steady Eddie since he got here. He's been the same guy despite everything, including the new contract he just received. It's a credit to him. We've seen improvement from those things we've identified in the self-scouting process and over the spring. So Goff looking even better than he did last year. JMO, he said he looks more confident even at the end of last year, and he's carried that through. We feel the juice that he brings. He also wants to be a dynamic blocker, which we value as well. But his route tree has grown and developed. There's nothing he can't do. It's been fun to watch. Tight ends. He said it's the best room I've been around in 13 years, 1 through 6, in terms of how they approach it, how they block, how they run routes. The competition is lights out right now. He said that the third guy needs to be able to fill in for either what Sam Laporta or Brock Wright do. So Brock is unquestionably number 2. So they need to be able to be smart and fill multiple roles. And if they could be good at some fullback stuff too, that would be great as well. So, don't ask for everything, guys. Just like Ant was alluding to in some of the backups, it's kind of hard to ask for, but there we go. Offensive line, he said we feel great about the first group, still gelling with Gray moving to left and Zeitler coming in. Swing tackles, a battle with Skip and Sawsdale and Galvin's doing a great job as well. Shame that Moody's going down, but it's an opportunity for Nice. The UDFA guys have got a shot to show that they're at least worth a practice squad spot in this league, and that Kingsley stands out at centre, but they're also cross-training him at guard. Coyote's coming back and getting into the swing of things after being injured. He said he's shocked that the staff has managed to not have too much losses and kind of maintained from where they are last year. They're taking it and they're running with it. We're better than we ever have been from that perspective. He said there's a balance with the players in training, the new guys in what we do, but challenging the vet guys who know their stuff to get to new heights and not get stale. So they're trying to make sure that they're challenging everyone, which I think is a really hard line to tread, but, they seem to have done okay so far. In the run game, he said our defensive front's going to be pretty damn good, I think. He said over 2 days in camp, in PAS, we've had more runs stuffed than we have over the last 2 previous training camps. So we're close to generating some big runs, but haven't put it all together yet. Our combinations haven't been quite right. We're not 100% clicking, but that's not uncommon at that stage of camp. And they said, we've tried double teaming Aleem and we've barely moved him off the ball, which is amazing to hear. Hendon, he said, we're coaching Hooker hard, throwing things at him, and then when he's making mistakes, they're giving it back to him as coaching points, so that when he gets to the practice squad games, they're going to be a cinch for him, which feels like the death knell, to be honest. He said you can tell he's really worked hard between OTAs and camp because things have become a lot easier for him. God, what was it like before? He said he's on the move a bit more with his legs, which are going to be a real benefit to us. And I mean, if he's going to win in this league, his legs are going to have to be a big part of it, at least to begin with. And finally, with the wide receivers, he said we need smart, we need reliable, and if we're picky, we need a bit of length. So we're charting every day who's the most reliable in terms of catches and drops, mental errors. They get the feedback, they know they're in the battle. The first player he mentioned was Dory's Fountain, who said has really come on. He said Antoine Green's pushing. He's grown and got more consistent. DPJ has had some big plays and got a huge block in yesterday as of the time of this press conference. He said Raymond is also a big piece, but it really sounded like Raymond was an afterthought, which is interesting, I think. But it's more, he described him as a gadget player, which I don't think is the compliment that he thinks it is. But there we go. 2 players then after that, Kevin Zeitler and Efati Metafonwu. So Zeitler said it's a great room, everybody is awesome. Hank, he's very detailed and passionate. He wants us to be great and keep our standard. I like working with him. He said Penne, I knew he was a freak by reputation, but he really lives up to it. Dan, he said, you can tell he was passionate, but it's very clear he cares about his guys, which is great to hear. He said he really appreciates Graham moving over from right to left and being a team guy. He said about Graham, with how smart he is, it's like having 2 centres in every play. It's amazing the arguments that Graham Glasgow and Frank Ragnow can have when they get into it on the line. So it's quite funny to hear that, with how good Frank is, that you've got Graham and his ear beside him going, I don't think you're right. But I quite like the image of that. And maybe the most illuminating thing across all of the press conferences that we're hearing about today is this quote from Kevin Zeitler. He said, I think that the Detroit Lions are going to have 2 $20 million defensive tackles soon. Those 2 being Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike. He said, and Aiden's a wrecking ball. If they have a good day, that's great. We raise our standards. If we beat them, that's great. They have to improve. But when you have Zeitler going against, in Baltimore last year, a player who broke out and got paid, Justin Madubuike. And then he's saying that Levi Onwuzurike is going to get a similar contract to that guy, is maybe the most telling thing across all of these. And then we go on to Melifonwu. He says, I feel like I'm just thinking less, not worrying too much about the plays and just worrying about actually making the plays and being more confident. He said he didn't work too much on the pass rush in the offseason, despite it being really his calling card last year. Just improving in coverage and technique. He said the competition's great. It's bringing the most out of people. It might be a little picky in terms of the little fights happening here and there, but there's no hostility. It just makes us all better. He said in terms of him getting better last year, he attributes it to his coaching. He said that Aaron Glenn was giving him some extra meeting time at the end of every game, the end of every training session after the Chicago game last year, and that Kirby Joseph was already doing that, which I thought was really interesting. So with Coach O'Neill, the new DB guy, there's a chance to get better on every rep, and he's very detail-oriented and will let you know. If it feels like detail-orientated is a trope by now, it's just something the Lions are looking for in their coaches, is that guy. And he said, we've got one of the best offenses in the league. When you go up against them, you naturally get better. It's a challenge, but we're good too, and we're making them work. And maybe the most informative day of the lot, because, well, we get Dan every day, but Ben just spoke about everything. But then Zeitler's been around in this league, and he had that to say about Levi. I know we've spoken about Levi already, but fuck, that's good praise from a man who's seen it all.
All I can say is we're not going to have two £20 million D tackles soon, because we can't afford two £20 million D tackles.
We've got 40 million cap space.
We've already paid DJ Reader. We are not going to pay DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil,
We can cut Reader next year if we wanted to.
And Aidan Hutchinson.
Reader's only on like 10 mil a year.
Still, we're not going to pay that much to the off. Like, Pascal will be due one soon. If Pascal breaks out this year, he'll be due a deal soon.
The whole team needs paying. The whole team needs paying.
Yeah.
50 men getting more millions.
Yeah, please, sir, I want some more, except it's just been Oliver. It's 53 different guys saying, please, sir, I want some more. Brad Holmes is just like, oh my God, I'm going to need a bigger bowl. But
it's just looking around going, damn, I'm too good at this.
Yeah, like, oh man, you know, I need to lose some talent, man. Like, someone wants some of my talent. I've got too much.
Anyone want to trade? Trade? Anyone?
You know what? I love Ben. And I think tactically listening to Ben all day long, that is something you could probably do. I feel like, and again, I love him. The tight end room is the best I've been around in 13 years. This O-line looks tremendous. I think there's a little bit of disingenuity in there. Like, I get that, you know, these are heady words. Like, Laporta's great, right? Laporta's going to be one of the best tight ends in the NFL soon, so you could probably base it off Laporta.
Do not underrate Brock Wright. I fucking dare you. Do not underrate Brock Wright.
No, but best room in third. Like, I just feel this tiny bit of. But the O-line,
I think what he's saying though is like tight end 6 could make another roster, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's more towards the O-line. Like, I'm sorry, but the O-line is in a lot. Right, we can be as happy as we want about our O-line, and I love our O-line. I love Hank. We have a lot of problems. We have a metric ton of problems at this position because, as I've always said, there's no depth, none whatsoever. And these guys can again have great camps. Agua can do really well, but I need to see Kingsley Agua do out and be a great centre, playing some preseason football, showing that he's dominant, that he's technically savvy. I need to see Sorsdal go out there and do it. I need to see Manu go out there and do it. There's no experience, none whatsoever, and they can train as good as they want, but to just say we're in a wonderful position, I get he sees them, but right now, contrary to opinion, we've got nothing guaranteed at depth. Nothing. Apart from Awashika, really. And Awashika's battling injuries at this moment in time. And I think it's very disingenuous to go out there and say we are completely stoked. I mean, I know he is. He's a coach. He should. But I see lots of problems there. And they're not very easily solvable if we lose starters, and I just sometimes think you need to dial it back just a little bit. You go, oh look, we're great with what we've seen of the guys so far, but they've still got a lot to prove. Not everything's hunky dory, everything's great, it's wonderful, yada yada yada. It felt a bit too rah-rah-y in some instances for me. But
how dare you not chug the Kool-Aid in the preseason like all the rest of us mugs?
I have to try. See, the one thing I've learned, because like with Brad, I love Brad. I love Ben. I love this team. I love to be a positive guy. In the first few years of us doing this pod, I physically hated being so negative all the time. It upset me to be negative. I love to be positive. But on the flip side, you do just have to look realistic. You can't get too far ahead of yourself. You do have to look at legitimate criticisms towards the team. You can't silence them. You can't. You've got to give people a forum to have their concerns as well. And as I've always said, Hank has not developed a guy who's been drafted day 3. He's not developed a guy from there yet. And those are going to be the majority guys we're taking in depth this year. It's right to have questions about whether these guys are going to be able to hold up if the offensive line goes down because of the lack of depth we have there. There are concerns to be had. And I can't just go, oh yeah, it's great, we've got the best offensive line in the league, everything's hunky-dory. Because it isn't, and that would be disingenuous of me to say so. It would be an insult to say so. There are problems there. There are a lot of problems there. And again, no amount of good training makes up for it. You've got to go out there and show me that you've learned and that you can do it against NFL level opposition. So if they go out and absolutely bust a nut against the Giants this Thursday and run for 300 yards and they run block to oblivion, they do really well, fine. Then I'm going to take notice of you. But until then, I am going to remain skeptical.
Fair. All right. Final day we're going to cover here before we sign off for this one. August 2, Dan Campbell comes back to the podium. Missed him after only one day. He said this is going to be a scrimmage day. We're going to get 35 to 40 reps. It's the last practice before joint practices with the Giants. This should feel like a practice game, a preseason game. They should be scratching and clawing for everything they can get here, basically because it's going to give them the reps in the preseason games to come. Vaki said there's no long-term injury concerns there after he left trading the previous day. He said he's good. He's smart, instinctive, picking up the protections, but he's got a huge ceiling to grow into. He's doing good on special teams and he's putting in the work, but he's young and he's raw, which I think is really telling with Vaki. Onboarding the new guys, so obviously we made some signings at this point because of injury, and he was asked, how do you do it this far into camp? And he said, we just got to throw them to the fire. If you give them time, by the time they actually get it, you're out of time. So you just put them in there and see whether they can deal with it, because it's not fair to them otherwise. With Fountain, he said he makes plays. We are all intrigued by him. We need to see more, though. He needs to be more detailed in what he does, but he's got a great opportunity here. In the tight end room, he says, I agree with Ben that it's been the best in 13 years. He said it's a mix of different abilities with Brock and Sam Laporta. Obviously, that's great. The other 4 guys, it really is a competition, and they've all banked some reps in this league. You don't worry about about preseason games with these guys and missed assignments or anything like that. You know what you'll get out of that room, which is funny to hear because obviously James Mitchell did miss an assignment, but never mind. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he said, we expected him to compete for wide receiver 3-4 after Reynolds left. What's going to happen there? Is there going to be one guy at a committee? He said, I do expect more from him, but he is working hard and he does want it, but he needs to take another step. On Kirby, he says he just needs a bit more consistency going into year 3. Every year he's grown a bit, but this is a time for him to become a staple and a consistent player week to week because the sky's the limit for him. He said the more the offense has been challenged, this is the most the offense has been challenged in preseason by the defense with Mack, Harch and Levi. They've all taken a step. The DBs are challenging on the perimeter. They're covering better down the field. Physically and schematically, it's making you better on offense. It's a good place to be in. Asked about Jamar, he said, I don't want to answer this because it could be the kiss of death, but he's in a really good place. A really good place. A really good place. Which is just weird to hear the repetitiveness of that phrase, but there we go. He even interrupted the next question by saying a really good pace again, but, you know. And then he talked to Brian Dable about next week and the joint practices to organise it. He said, we're ready to go. The scripts have been passed. The coordinators are aware of what they're doing. We just need to get out there. Of course, we now know that actually travelling out there was really disrupted with the planes and stuff. Obviously, Jeremy Reisman, despite his best efforts, and the man isn't a lazy person, despite what some people on Twitter may think. Obviously, the weather has really tanked a lot of people's ability to get out there. A couple of players now to cover. Brock Wright said it's great to get some live reps and carry it over to next week. He said you can definitely feel the depth in the room. There's no slack. We're just making each other better. Looking forward to getting into preseason and seeing what we can do. So with Coach Hayden, it's great to have Steve as coach. He played for a long time, and it really shows in his technique and coaching and how he relates to the players. So going up against a defense like that helps us get better. It also gets me more confident that our D are going to be great up front because they are legit. He's alluded to the fact that he's been used quite a bit in the fullback position, as well as being able to do it all with flexing out or doing it in line. He said he just wants to become an all-round tight end. And on reports, he said he's always been a hard worker. He's the same every day. But his knowledge and his confidence through this offseason has stepped up big. He's improved from last year and he's going to be huge for us this year. And then Carlton Davis, he said the scrimmage definitely felt like a preseason game. The competition has always been high, but today it was higher because of the intensity and how it's built around this practice. He said this is a great group of guys. You can understand how they went to the NFC Championship game last year because their attention to detail. On the wide receivers, on Amon-Ra and Brandon Jameson, he said it's great going up against them. Amon-Ra, he's so intense. And Jamo's a special guy with his speed, but now there's so much more he can do to beat you. So Fountain has been really good. Khalif's a great guy. Laporte is a great challenge. Jamo's going to be a real problem this league. You can tell he's hungry. So they are all causing me problems. I'm stressing out there. That I need to be pushed and have that competition level to hit my peak. So it's perfect for him. So I love Aaron Glenn. Anthony Glenn? God.
Got me on your brain.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking of Anthony Lynn somehow. I don't know how I was going back to that, but my word. Is that Glenn is a great guy to be coached by. He's intense. He doesn't drop his standards. He's going to push you, but he's going to coach you. He's been great for me so far. And then Terrion Arnold came in and just completely destroyed the interview late, kind of taking it over. But he said, what do you feel about Terrion? He said, Terrion's a special guy. If he stopped talking so much, he said he could be Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's very resilient. He doesn't care what people say about him. He's got that swagger and confidence. And a lot to digest there. But some really good stuff to hear. I mean, he doesn't want to give the kiss of death to Jamar. He's talking about some people kind of taking a step or needing more from them, like Kirby and DPJ. But the Fountain has got a really great opportunity, and you know, it's interesting stuff. And just about the onboarding process for the new guys, the way that he thinks about the game and about training camp is really interesting. And then Brock Wright and Carlton Davis, maybe not with the hugest amount to say in the end of those press conferences.
I just want to know what script him and Dayball gave to each other. It feels like they gave each other the script for Fight Club. Let's go out there and kick the shit out of one another. And that's what they did. They did all day. They just went out and, like, they didn't give a script for a scrimmage. They gave a script for an action movie. Like, all you've done is seen them fight all day. Dan talks about scratching and clawing for everything. Well, Jack Campbell literally did. He came off the field with a crimson red hand. He literally scratched and clawed for everything. It's crazy, but, like, that's the level Dan aspires to. I think the Giants are so desperate to be us that they, like this time last year, we completely manhandled them at scrimmage, and we came with a swag and an intensity and the grit, and it felt like they were trying to imitation the sincerest form of flattery. It felt like they were trying to be us today, except they were just more interested in fighting than having a scrimmage there. But you can see why Dan's picked them. Like, you know, if you want your guys to be smacked in the face and given a challenge early, I guess like this feels like one of the most apt teams. And you're gonna get your guys up for it. You're gonna get them raw-rawed early. You know, the Giants are the team to go up against there. So I just felt that was quite funny. It seems to be quite prophetic. Like he was talking about this days ago. He was like, yeah, they've gone in and they've done exactly what they said to. They're gonna scratch, they're gonna claw, they're just gonna absolutely beat the shit out of them. So not much in terms of like the guys he's he's been talking about like Jamar again. It's great. There are no fourth year running backs from round 7 who stay with their initial team really and are still fighting it out, especially when they've not really played that much either. Like these guys are just dime a dozen. Most of them are in the CFL or working a Dollar General by now. But he's not. He's still on that team, and there's still a reason that he's on that team. And it feels more and more like if he has one big game in preseason that he could snatch that last running back 4 spot and earn it, and I would not be upset with it. I think that would be great for him to be able to come in and do it. DPJ, yeah, DPJ needs game time. Like the receivers, all of them, DPJ, Fountain, Brown. This is all going to come down to who is the best guy in preseason for me. Who goes out there and makes plays on the field, who doesn't drop catches, who runs their routes well, who executes their assignments perfectly, who shows themselves as the best all-round player in this game or in the 3 games. They're going to be the guys that get there. It just feels like they're dead heated. After all the training, after all the practice, they're still not sure. So, that's what it's going to come down to. And it will a lot of positions. Like we're running back 4, who's going to be the best in preseason, with the offensive lineman, who's going to show out during the preseason games to go in the depth going forward. It's intriguing, but at the same time, it's just a very healthy level of competition to have all over. So again, I just loved listening to Dan. As for the players, it's just paying lip service to everything, really. Again, go out and show it really what it's all about. Not much I can take from it.
Yeah, absolutely fair. There may be some breaking news, but it depends how reliable the source is. So the source is Cam Marino, who's the lead draft writer for NFL Draft Buzz, which is a very legit draft site. And he formerly wrote for USA Today, apparently. Cam Marino reports that the Steelers and 49ers have agreed for a trade for Brandon Ayuk to Pittsburgh, which is interesting. Not unexpected. Cam Marino did talk about them being the leading people in the trade discussions for Ayuk. There have been some negative things coming out about Ayuk in the last hour or so on social media, which is quite interesting too. But obviously, that'll
salty 49ers fans. I don't believe them. You can generally see when a player's a diva on the field. Like Brandon Ayuk has had to spend his whole career playing second fiddle to Deebo Samuel. Everybody talks about
He's
Deebo.
So much better than him as well.
Exactly. Brandon Ayuk probably has a claim to be one of the most disrespected players in the entire NFL. Because everybody talks about Deebo and McCaffrey and like he's the forgotten third wheel. But if you take Ayuk out that team, they probably suck. All right? Like these guys aren't going to go out there and do it all. He's the vital cog that makes that team work. And they'll be a lot worse without him. And Ayuk deserves to go and be a wide receiver 1 somewhere. Like that's insane. That Pittsburgh team on paper is incredibly good now. Like I say, they've invested in offensive linemen out the draft who are run blocking specialists. You have a legitimate 1-2 punch at running back. You have a legitimate dual threat quarterback. Like the offensive line is better. And that defense is just always going to be great. Like it is stupidly good, that defense is. Stupidly good. So is this a hot take right now? I would put the Steelers in as a dark horse to dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC this year. If they can sort the quarterback out early and don't swap around with it, if they have got Ayuk, pencil me in for Steelers for AFC champions.
That is a hot take. I don't think anyone's talking about that right now.
I just love their team. Like I was saying to the guy earlier, like I love the way their draft mindset is. Like, if I wasn't a Lions fan and I was picking a team from scratch, but I had all the information that I know watching college and stuff like that, I would probably pick the Steelers because I know damn well they probably have a better chance of picking the black guys I actually like rather than the Lions. But they think like I do. Go out there and absolutely pummel people into the ground with no mercy.
Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I mean, I guess we've not really talked much about what we want to see out of these preseason games, have we? I guess we have, but at the same time, we've not really talked about them,
No,
really.
no, that's fair. Okay, so
I
what do you
mean,
want to
in
see
terms,
then?
I mean, I guess we're not going to see the start. I don't want to see the offensive line. I don't want to see Jared Goff. I know that. I know I've been very vocal in giving the starters reps in preseason the last few years, but with the sheer lack of depth we've got behind them, I am in favor of just not playing them at all this year. But, playing the Giants, I guess this is the time where I want to see guys like Broderick and guys like Colby come to the fore. They're moving into their second year. They've had a year to refine themselves. We've heard some decent things about them. Like they're not just going to be all-stars by the end of this year. They're still going to both rotate in and out, and they're going to work their way into the team this year. But I'm very intrigued to see how they're getting on. I want to see them play well. And then I guess it's how many of these guys out of camp are going to shine. Like, if we were to guess now, Matt, like, do you really think Doris Fountain is that guy? Like, we've seen Tom Kennedy be that guy for so many years now in camp and rip it up. Like, I'd like to ask a question. Who has balled out in camp out of all the guys who we don't expect, like Parker Hesse, Doris Fountain, Jamar Jefferson? Who, for you, is going to carry that on into preseason? Who's actually going, like, who's going to make a name for themselves? Don't have to be them three. It could be anybody who's on the periphery who you actually think, I actually think they're going to go out and do it.
Okay, so I mean, I am believing in the Fountain hype. You mentioned him just then. You said apart from it, but I am just going to say I think he's going to be a starter if we come out in 11 personnel. I think he'll probably be the X, but when we go from 11 to 12 personnel, which may well be our base formation, he'll drop out. So he might get 15 to 20 reps a game, but I expect him to deliver in this preseason in a big, big way. Sticking at wide receiver, I think Caden Davis is going to have a big preseason. I think he's going to see a lot of reps, but I expect him to do really well. I mean, screw it. Why not Zylstra as well? I mean, he seems to be a guy who turns up every preseason, so maybe that's not a surprise. Sawsdall, I hope, but I don't expect. Let's see what happens. Otherwise, defense, I'm going to go Rakestraw. Like, it feels like he's built up some momentum at the back end of training camp. The number of INTs he's stacking back to back, it feels like he's coming into his own a bit and getting a bit more confidence. When the pads have come on, he's come into his own because he's someone who's very physical. I'd love to see him get a couple of interceptions in this preseason. That's pretty much it for me. Anyone else to add for you?
I don't know. See, it's weird. Like, with preseason, obviously, we don't care about the results. We don't care if we win or lose, but I very much care that the performances are good. Like, if I see us blown out 3 times, like this year, it's all about depth, right? We are trying to establish that we're not trying to look for starters. We're trying to look for depth. We're trying to look for the second year guys getting better and that. But there is a part of me that wants to see us be very competitive. And I would be disappointed. I guess for me, a bad preseason would be us just looking totally lethargic and not executing well. And I want to see that from guys because we're on a train here, buddy. There's only a few spots left. You want to come to the big time? Do you have what? I think for me this year, it's very brutal. My level expectation for you is very high, or you can't come along. But that's where the team is, right? You've got to be great, or there's no room for you. Being serviceable is not good enough for preseason, right?
Yeah, you're right. It isn't. We've got to start quickly.
Like if you're going to be Doris Fountain, if you're going to have 80, 90 yards in your first game, look great, get a touchdown maybe, fine. But if you follow that up with 2 duds, that means nothing. Like you've got to start game after game after game. 3 games where you are really good if you want to come on this train with us. And in years past, I'd maybe not be like that. I just want to see them get better individually as players. But I think this time, like there has to be a team ethic there. There has to be someone who stands out entirely. Like, I mean, the edge room, it's weird. What do we do with the edge room? Who do we play there? I feel like after Hutch, no one else should be guaranteed a spot on this roster, but obviously they will be, but I think they should play. I think Davenport should play.
So I was about to say he'd be the one that I'd hold out just because we know the more reps he takes, the more likely it is he goes down. I'm kind of okay. He's done enough in camp where he's been healthy and he's had some good feedback that I'm kind of like, okay, just do it in the games now. Like, that's fine. I think this is where you've got to hope that Isaac Ukwu, Matthew Betts, Mitchell Agude, those sorts of guys, and James Houston. Play James Houston at edge, for fuck's sake. Like, please.
I'd put Pascal in there as well.
Yeah, no, I put Pascal in there too. Sorry, I was more going like the deep depth. But yeah, for sure.
I play... For me, everyone bar Hutch. No one's... I don't care about Davenport. All he's shown recently is he's been an injury bust. And he's had all these injuries and he's not the guy he used to be. Go out and earn your spot. He's not earned a spot on this roster. I think he should go out there and play. Like the O-linemen have. Like Zeitler comes in as, what was he, the 5th best guard in the NFL last year? Is that right? Something like that. He was top 5, wasn't he?
I don't know whether that's true.
Statistically, I think he was a top 5 guard in the NFL last year.
It was a down year for him last year, as far as I was aware, but I don't know.
I still think he's at his prime, high level.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He doesn't need to earn it, but Davenport's not played properly in a year. I would play him.
Fair enough.
The corners, I mean, what would you do with a corner room here? I mean, like, we're all going to take them, obviously, aren't we? We're going to take Arnold, we're going to take Rakestraw, we're going to take Davis, we're going to take a Meek. Mosley? We're going to take Mosley?
Yes.
I'd play him.
Yeah.
I'd play him.
I'd play him. He needs the reps. But
yeah,
he's absolutely making the roster. There's no doubt. Like, the way that they're talking about him, he might start. Like, he might be the starting nickel. He's apparently played very well.
I think if you're going to play starters or potentials, I think you have to play the entire sector. I think you've got to work that out before the season. You know, they're moving these guys around. They're playing different packages with them, trying to get them used to different positions. I think if one positional group has to play as a starter, it's got to be that secondary, right? Surely.
Yeah.
I think it would be negligence to not play them a lot. You've got to get it right. And if you get an injury, then hell, we've got depth. You can deal with that. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives when it comes to it.
So I've just looked at Zeitler. Overall offensive ranking on PFF, he was 19th, but he was the second best pass blocker. It's just that he was very low in run blocking. So that's maybe where you've heard the hype is the pass blocking. But anyway, another player, we missed the obvious answer for preseason, didn't we? The obvious answer is Hooker. Because the thing is, if Hooker can't be QB2, you have to carry 3 quarterbacks, which means number 53 falls because we can't carry them. But if Hooker plays well enough to win the backup job, Sudfeld falls to the practice squad and you can keep number 53, who's probably a good player.
Okay, this is one. Who starts the first game, Hooker or Sudfeld? Because Sudfeld's been better than Hooker.
Hooker. But he needs the reps. Sudfeld doesn't really need the reps. Like, he's been in this league long enough. It doesn't really matter. We should play Hooker the whole fucking game.
Is that what you think they'll do then?
No, I think they'll go 50-50.
I do.
You think 50-50?
Yeah. I do. I'm just not sure. Again, I don't know if it matters. Maybe it does, because if you do the second half, you get into the third and fourth stringers rather than the second stringers. But I think it'll be telling. They seem to have said nothing but nice things about Sudfeld this offseason, whereas with Hooker, they said a lot of not nice things. But he is a rookie.
It's about who needs to be challenged.
Who
needs to be challenged and who needs to have their confidence built, though. Like, Sudfeld needs his confidence building because he's a vet and he just needs to be told he's good and maybe we'll get something from him. But Hooker, it's like, do better. You need to be challenged. Like, you can do better than this. So, and it's also about who they think is going to be here long term. There's nothing bad about blowing a bit of smoke up Sudfeld's ass because who cares if he's here? Like, it doesn't matter. But with Hooker, it's like, we care about you. We want you to be the future, or at least a big part of what we do as the backup. So you better be good enough.
Yeah. And that's the theme for me this preseason. I feel like this feels like the most important preseason in a long time.
Yes, absolutely.
Because And it cannot be understated, these games, because I think there are so many guys, whether they be late round draft picks, UDFAs, etc., who need to prove themselves. We can only take proven commodities on the roster this year. We can't take maybes.
No.
And it just feels like that you're going to have to be great, not good, to get on the roster. I think in previous years, good will have got you in because there were that many holes on this roster. But like you say, CJ Moore's not even seen a snap. Like, I hate to say it, but he's not good enough.
We trained
And
someone to be a pump protector in his
exactly
time away from the team. So
his role is no longer good enough. Like you said, special teams only, no longer good enough. So, that's the level of standards is there. I still think we might see some cuts that really surprise us if it goes wrong.
Oh yeah. So the Dungeon of Doom podcast, which is M Live's Detroit Lions podcast, said at this point, basically, if they had the 53-man cut down now, DPJ wouldn't make it. They basically intimated that he is below Caden Davis and maybe Geelong Calhoun in the pecking order for them in terms of how he's performed at camp.
Oh.
Like, that's rough for DPJ.
I think I'd love that with Jalen Calhoun. I was a Duke stan from last year. I think if I want to see anyone from obscurity make this roster, it will be him. I would love to see him have a great preseason and just completely ruin things.
It's going to be a really interesting preseason as well, just because in the rotation of those bottom guys, can they win a couple of reps here and there, which buys the opportunity to get more reps? And I'm thinking about people who might be rookies, like Meki Wingo, people who are backups who are really scratching just to make it, like Kindle Vildor. Like, I know people want to not like him, and he did have some gas, but man played good last year in tight spots before those gaffes. And like, when you're putting him up against Stephen Gilmore, and we're hearing Stephen Gilmore needs to show us more, and Maurice Norris is showing something back there as well. Like, all of these guys are playing for like number 53 and then number 54 through 68 and 69, 68. Like, that, it's going to be. Do they keep 4 tight ends? Does Zylstra, Mitchell, Hesse, McKeown play well enough that they actually want to keep 4 tight ends? Can they afford to? Is the 4th tight end the one that doesn't go because we have to carry 3 quarterbacks? Or does Vaki have a position under threat because we can only carry 3 running backs?
Or does Jamar Jefferson or Zonovan Knight replace him as running back 4?
It's perfectly
I can
possible.
see us not having... Hang on. So Wingo, Mahogany, Varkey, Manu. I could potentially see us not having 3/4 of our day 3 picks on the roster this year.
So do you think Wingo's a shoe-in at this point, considering what else has happened? No, you think he's still potentially
I think Wingo's in trouble. Wingo's in trouble with Levi playing well. Because we're going to take Broderick. Broderick's only going into year 2, let's not forget. Broderick's not in danger on this roster. Broderick's a long-term project like Solstal. He's not in danger. Then you got Levi, you got Reader, you got Aleem. Are you going to take 5D tackles? Like, that's your thing. Or are you going to... I think the injury to Kamish may have helped Wingo. Because Kamish is one of the guys you can sort of sneak inside for a few reps if you need him to, who might take that DT5 spot because he's versatile. But I think Wingo's in danger. And I think it's perfectly possible that he's in danger, even though they use the draft picks on him. Mahogany's in danger because of the illness. I think Wingo's in danger. Hot take. I think our day 3 draft class is in trouble, but again, isn't that what a good team is?
Yeah, it is.
Doesn't need day 3 draft picks to bolster its roster.
It was always said before this regime took over, with basically any team, that day 3 picks are a flyer and hopefully they make the team. We just signed a guy that didn't make it from round 7 in the 2018-17 NFL draft that we picked. Like, it always used to be the norm that maybe round 4 is different, but 5, 6, and 7, let's see what you have, but maybe don't make it. And we haven't been like that because we've been so bad. We are better now, so yeah.
That's what I mean. There's just this preseason is probably the most important we've ever had.
Yeah.
Because it's not sorting out starters, it's starting out the depth that wins you a Super Bowl. And we are in need of depth at offensive line, wide receiver, and the critical positions. As I said, I think we're going to see some really bloodthirsty cuts this year. If you don't perform, forget camp. You see what happens in these games. That will tell you who is staying or not, because it's the closest they're going to get to finding out who can do it on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's fair. Right, I'm going to cut this off now because we have been going for a long, long time. Apologies to everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. It's been a great...
It's what they come for.
Yeah,
they come for an hour-long podcast here.
It's true. How can you? I hope everyone enjoyed the chat that we had with our guests earlier. It's some of the more fun podcasts that we do, I think, hearing from the other, especially UK-based guys that we talk to, because you can see the passion really bleed through, much like we have here. So I hope you enjoyed that. And the rest of our ramblings on training camp and the pressers, and then just talks about preseason. I hope you have a good preseason as it starts this Thursday. There won't be a live stream for the first 2 preseason games. Unfortunately, I will be on vacation. Hopefully, we will have a show this time next week. It may not be live because Ant has the streaming difficulties that he has. So if it goes up, it will probably be potentially an upload, not live, but let's see what happens. Regardless, they'll be talking about training camp, obviously, the joint practices with the Giants to round up, and then a debrief about how preseason game 1 went against the Giants. College Football Podcast is going to be back with the Sun Belt West, looking at the rest of the Sun Belt after they did the Sun Belt East a couple of weeks ago. And you can find us on Royal Lions UK across your social media, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And the group for worldwide fans is Detroit Lions Fans UK One Pride. Worldwide, the website rotluk.com. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Thank you for the super chats as well, which were very generous through this show. Appreciate you all. Have a great week, and we'll see you really soon. But for now, let's go Lions. One Pride.
One Pride.
Recording stopped.